I just need to get it. My eyes are a bit twitchy today. Something fell in it, and it's irritated it quite a bit. I was actually dusty. It doesn't help. Oh, God. Anyway, my eye starts crying. You know why? It's not because of anything that anybody said to offend me or whatever. God. So as you guys know, whoever's actually put comments in the restream, they don't come through on restream. So the first one's G'day Clark and Deborah. Good to see you. G'day Neff. Yeah, running it on restream. I've run it out of StreamYard. And I did have a couple of issues with trying to actually set something up on StreamYard. So I said I buggered it. I've got a couple of hours there left, but that's about it. So switching over, I noticed Bart's been having a few problems with his live stream. Sort of, he's pissed off with StreamYard now. StreamYard's got a few issues. I think that the biggest thing that I find most annoying is their chat window just flies away. You just lose their chat window, and it's really annoying, to say the least. So g'day, Bruce. Harut, good to see you, and Robert as well. General Jane, always a pleasure. And Joe. Just to remind people, a lot of the things like broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, all those sort of things, they're all related, and so they're very much goitrogenic, as Lukey's actually pointed out, plus sulforaphane, which is touted as something healthy. It's not really good for you in large amounts either. So, if you want hormesis, just go and do some exercise. That'll give you enough hormesis without disrupting any other your endocrine system in any negative way. So it's not required any of that. It's just junk science. Scotty. Oh, yes, the life of the Monty Python one. Yes, yes. With all the fish called Bruce. Yes. In a nutshell, why is the carnivore diet superior to keto? It's how humans have been eating for a very, very long time. Now, keto, humans basically when they're on a carnivore diet like the Maasai, like, remember Mary Ruddock actually did testing on the Maasai, and she found them in this low grade of 1 millimole. They were sort of gravitating between either a bit above or a bit below 1 millimole. And that's everyone. Males, females, anyone that they actually she tested, and she took a lot of test kits with her, notice very similar. And same sort of things are noticed amongst many other tribals, only in certain seasonal periods when they're fattening up by engaging the Randall cycles towards the end of summer and all that, where they've got accessibility in the wild to some of these compounds. That's the only time they sort of shift out. And also when they're probably eating in excess, they're eating quite a bit, they will sort of move in and out of that ketotic state, which is a good thing. You don't want to be in a catabolic state forever, continuously, either. You have fat stores to basically store energy for a rainy day. You don't want to be basically in constant energy sort of deficit. Not a good thing. That's what high ketosis is. Now, it does have some therapeutic benefits, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, in terms of general living, the carnivore diet's superior. It also basically furnishes your body with more taurine from the actual meats. And, well, for the Maasai, also from dairy and other things. For other, in terms of seafood, eggs, and many other sources that they may get a bit of taurine here and there. It has a very strong osmotic effect throughout the whole body. That means it is a regulator of a lot of systems in terms of keeping them in a level of homeostasis. Something a pure keto diet, which is very high in fat, very low in protein, cannot do. This is why people struggle with electrolytes. The moment people need to supplement and constantly adjust their electrolytes and stuff like that, it's telling you that something isn't basically indicated as being normal, natural. It's like the vegan diet. Yes, you can disengage the Randall cycle by being on a fruitarian diet, but at the end of the day, it's devoid of sufficient nutrients. It's a fasting mimicking diet, which basically means you're in a catabolic state continuously. Again, it is a very unhealthy state to be continuously. So short term, yes, superior to the standard diet, but long term, contraindicated and can be very damaging to the thyroid and your general endocrine system. Not a good idea. Your body needs a certain level of protein and a certain level of fat to basically function properly all the time. And that is why a carnivore diet will always be superior, because it can actually furnish the body with far more nutrient density, and at the same time can basically keep the body in this sort of swing between anabolism and catabolism, a sort of a very natural state to be, which is what our human ancestors were. They weren't constantly growing, but they weren't constantly breaking down. They were in this swinging between one state or another due to the access and availability of food in the environment, which was limited. So they had to work very hard for it. So that's pretty much it. Anyway, it's a good question to get us going, so to speak. Oops. I've increased my taurine intake through eating scallops, mussels more often. Yep, fine. Do the things. Canned mussels will have good amounts, or would a lot of be lost in the canning process? It depends. If it's a traditional canning process, not a lot is lost, and as long as you use the water content. If it's some modern canning processes they replace the water, as a consequence of that, you can lose a lot of taurine. So it depends on the process, the industrial process. That's why I can't recommend, and that's why I say usually fresh rather than canned, because I've got no issue. Now, if it's from certain parts of the world, like some of the Eastern European countries and some of the Scandinavian countries, that are still, and they do, like on their can, they put that they've used traditional methods of canning. You're probably good to go with those methods. But if there's if it's sort of, one of the standard companies, the big companies, I just wouldn't trust them to be doing the right thing. in terms of their canning procedures. They're more into the efficiency rather than sort of quality, so to speak. Gary, hi all. I've been on an epic reaction to Jabba the Hutt, the third fizzy muscle and joint pains all over my body. Painkillers helping, but seriously pissed with this. Look, yeah, I'm sort of lucky they've sort of laid off me for a while. So I'm working permanently now from home. So they've relented, and my own agents, my area of work, my general managers told that they will manage me directly. So I'm no longer being managed in terms of COVID by the human resources section, which is good because they're literal, like, sort of they've got their own little, they're indoctrinated and they believe that they need to force everyone. So I've got them off my back, thankfully. So my agency said you can work from home permanently until, so they are encouraging me to go for Novavax. So I don't know how long their good graces are going to be. Somebody's already done the Novavax recently and sent me a copy of their testing. They went and tested themselves, and when it comes to their results are really good. So no clotting, no myocarditis. They actually looked, troponin and also dimmer sort of levels. They were basically below the normal. So obviously the carnivore diet actually improves clotting factors and also improves cardiovascular function. So they're getting that benefit from the diet. Plus, there didn't seem to be any adverse reaction when it came to the Novavax. It's a traditional vaccine, so even though we haven't done the 5 to 7 year efficacy, because that's the time frame that is required before you mass or mandate mass use by all, let alone the other stuff that comes from the oncology field. It had a lot of side effects, and it's just outrageous that it was actually mandated and wasn't left voluntary. And for high risk groups, very elderly and frail people that, generally speaking, usually die through flu seasons and stuff like that because they're just too frail and they've got very poor immune systems. They're usually in nursing homes. They're on a very kibble, poor diet, so they've got very poor immune function. So that's why they're more vulnerable. That the general population is being forced is outrageous, in my personal opinion. But I know a lot of people have been forced in a situation where I've been forced to take a lot of my leave and put the pressure on my own area of work. Do you want to keep me? Sort of attitude. And they replied, we want to keep you. So I seemed to be important to them for them to retain that corporate knowledge. So they didn't want to lose. So they've gone out of their way to keep the wolves at bay, so to speak, which is good. That let's say I'm very thankful to my manager that he basically has gone out on a limb. He's actually had the Jabba the Hutt thing, but he's gone out on a limb to support me and get the human resources people off my back. So that's taken a lot of stress. I've been extremely stressful. You guys know I'm in my mid-50s. I'm 5 years out from retirement. I've got a lot of benefits to lose beyond employment, even retirement benefits that could be reset, and I could lose all those, which would force me to work up until much later to be able to accumulate enough of sort of entitlements to be able to retire on. So that's annoying that I've been forced in that sort of position. So I've been under tremendous stress. I think I've aged a couple of years just under the stress, I haven't been happy. I've been really sort of down in the depressed slightly, really feeling shitty, not happy. I've just tried to do things here and there, so I haven't been happy at all. And I'm pissed off that I've burnt through all my leave entitlements. So, even my sister was asking, are you coming to your niece's wedding overseas? How? Don't even have enough, to, yeah. So I'm very annoyed with the whole situation. So, and the requirements, I wouldn't even be able to comply with the rules to fly anyway. It's just, yeah, it's pissed me off no end. And I understand how you, in your situation, Gary, all I can say is, mate, there is that protocol that Bart's talked about. I can't get those meds. I can send you, if you send me an email, I will send you the list. You're in a sort of area, maybe you can access those meds. I can't access those meds. There's no way. All I can recommend for people is to really do a 3-day fast, reset your immune system, put a lot of taurine and vitamin D into your system, and menaquinone 4. Get your T cells really high for good clearance, to clear the stuff out. And if you can get those other drugs that are on that list, um, I'll email you the thing. And yeah, actually, what I'll do is I'll stick a link in the description of this video after, and basically I'll put it up in my Drive folder, which means anybody can download it. I'll provide it so you can get access to it, whoever needs it. Yeah, I just hope you're able to access those meds for yourself, and whoever else needs it. So it's annoying. This whole situation is outrageous, but yeah, I don't have many solutions for you. Sorry, mate. Beyond the vitamin D and the taurine and building up your T lymphocytes to help you clear, but also there is some of these meds also tend to assist in more rapidly removing, some of the deleterious, because you do get a lot of spread of a lot of viral, these sort of foreign protein particles all over the body, creating a lot of reactivity. And also you're getting your own you know immune system slightly compromised and hijacked, and it's the reason why I said do a 3-day fast to kill off your old immune system, to reset in that regard, which is the sort of the quickest and easiest option for somebody who doesn't have access to meds and stuff like that. Other people out there, if you can get these meds, they can help. Anyway, move on. It's not good news, mate. Not good news at all. Yeah, that's it. Look, certain things are hard to get. Just look at the cans and just try and find cans that are basically have a traditional way of being done. That's the only thing. At the end of the day, look, yeah, you're going to get other nutrients from the mussels, which is a very good profile in terms of minerals and stuff like that. So they do have other benefits as well. Yeah. Yeah, maybe, mate. Maybe. That's it. Hey, Harry, your thoughts? Basically, what Lukey said earlier about goitrogens is a big issue. Plus, sulforaphane, a lot of people promote it as basically as something that gives a hormetic effect, but you can get hormesis also from just exercising. It's a small stressor. We don't need to pack it. We've got a lot of stresses in our body from our environment, employers with mandates stressing us as well. The last thing we need is excessive stress. We get plenty. What we really need to do is actually lower cortisol. We need to lower these stress levels, and actually, by eating animal foods that are high in taurine, actually increases GABA, lowers cortisol, and re-regulates, in a sense, also the cortisol levels to respond within a normal physiological range. So, as I said, taurine is a regulator in the body. It's not an osmotic effect in the bloodstream, the intra and extracellular fluids, in the gut. Again, it actually regulates motility. That means the speed of your gut. Um, so it is one of these antioxidant and master regulators throughout the body. I can't stress it enough. And also some of the damaging effects of, like even the actual C19, that actually can do slight damaging effects to certain tissue. It really helps with the fibrotic, eliminating that. So that's a sort of superfood you want. Broccoli, I wouldn't waste my money. Uh, Lukey, au naturel. Good to see you here, mate. Hey, gee, always a pleasure, mate. Um, well, you're not necessarily, if you're eating green leafy vegetables on a keto diet, you're not going to be engaging the Randall cycle. But there are advantages of eating more meat compared to plants. Plants have very poor nutrition. Most people are basically starving for nutrition and not getting enough protein for their whole system. Because protein plays a lot of roles. Has regulatory roles, is involved in, is required for neurotransmitters. It's just not only fat. Okay, you need fat for myelination, you need fats and cholesterol for all these sort of things, but you still need proteins as well. All these structures are made of protein and fat, not just fat. Um, so it's nonsensical. We need both. And a carnivore diet is way closer to what ancestrally we've done based on the N15 data. And I go on the N15 data. I'm not even interested in other arguments, because basically any keto person can say whatever they like, and I can turn around and say one simple thing: show me a multi-generational study on keto. They got none. Keto diet has been around for some time, on and off, on and off. And the therapeutic types with high fat, low protein types have been around for a long time, for epilepsy, for other things. I mean, even the Romans knew they used to throw people who had neurological disorders like schizophrenia or whatever. They used to throw them into a room and deny them food and put them into ketosis, so to speak. And that seemed to eliminate some of their craziness, as they used to say. But basically, what they were putting them into ketosis. You can still be in a low-grade ketosis on a carnivore diet and swing in and out and be very healthy and very stable and all that. And you take a look at a lot of people like Amber O'Hearn and many others. They had problems regulating a number of things on a keto diet. On a carnivore diet, you don't have to think about it. Just eat meat, and meat and steak and eggs, or, if you can tolerate eggs. But just eating steaks, you don't need to put a bit of salt on your steak, and you don't even have to worry about any of this sort of stuff. Your electrolytes are managed by the taurine in the meat. Um, it's a non. It's a you see tribal people, they just kill an animal, cut it up, and start eating it. Some raw, and then they also um, the Inuit consume a lot of raw meat, and plus cooked stuff and all that. No issues whatsoever. Multi-generational. And the N15 data backs up this multi-generational situation. It's a non-issue. It's basically a non-issue. Yeah, so I wouldn't even worry about it. It's not even an argument between the two. A keto diet is a very open-ended thing. What is it really? You can have a keto diet, a vegan keto diet, all the way to a heavy animal-based keto diet. There's a lot of gamut there. Paleo keto diet. There's all variations. I'd stick to basically a low-grade carnivore ketogenic type approach, where you're swinging in and out of this low-grade ketosis, and that is way healthier. And that's more indicated when you look at tribal populations around the planet. That's how they actually live. So I'd stick to that, and I'd stick the N15 data as my guide, since we don't have any long-term multi-generational studies. The only thing we have is the N15 data from archaeology. I'll take that as a higher source of evidence than I will take some sort of observational epidemiological nonsense that's out there. So, and a lot of keto people use, like a lot of the vegans and many others, and use a lot of this nonsense observational stuff. It's just junk, irrelevant. My friend who owns a health food store said to soak in baking soda. She mentioned something else I didn't remember. That's weird. Baking soda? Okay, everybody's got their little weird things. Yes, let's stick to science and what we really know. How are you? Why do you think some people LDL rise so quickly on a carnivore while others not? It's basically the ApoE, pretty much. That's all it is. There are a couple of other genes as well that seem to play a role as well. Mine doesn't really, it's where it was. It's more or less in a very similar way. It doesn't really go up. Just doesn't. Now, obviously, if I fast for a very long time, or anybody fasts, their LDL will go up. It doesn't matter what your genetics are. Anybody that fasts, LDL will go up. But anybody that eats and their LDL goes up, they're actually what are classified as hyperresponders. They usually have an ApoE of 4, whether it's 4.4, 4.3, or 4.2. Now, I've actually done a video on that, but not on my channel, on Pim's channel. She invited me. I was going to do it on my channel, and she asked me, "Oh, can you do?" And I said, "Fine." I did it on her channel. So if you go to my playlist, the one that I did with Pim, I've got a playlist on my channel of all the videos that I did collaborated with Pim Johnson, and one of them is the ApoE one, and it explains really well why this happens. And once you've seen that and you understand about how these, lipoprotein type vehicles move around the body and how they actually, the energy flux between the bloodstream, what's come in, and the actual liver and the receptor sites, you'll quickly understand why this happens to some people and not to others. So go and check that video and you'll get a really good education on ApoE. And if you take a look at people like Dave Feldman, he's an ApoE 4.3. So he is susceptible to this condition. That's why he gets. And just eating inappropriate foods to try and control it is ridiculous, because It naturally happens this way. It's supposed to happen. It's indicated for his genetics. You know, somebody that's got a 2-2, they will struggle. They will have very low, even when they eat a lot, or any diet, their LDL will be very low. Mine's somewhere in the middle. It's always, if I eat quite a bit of saturated fat, in that regard, it usually can go down. I'd actually, the lowest I actually got it was 3.2. My previous one was 3.7. So that's you know. So yeah, in the millimole range, where you'll have to convert it to the other one. But pretty much most people, it's depends on their genetics. That's all it is. This whole bullshit, just because you can measure it, it's become a big thing. It's ridiculous. Even my doctor, my cardiologist, when I turned up, he said, your triglycerides, and even though I thought they were high, 1.7, but that's also not considered very high. And my LDL my total cholesterol was in 4 point something. I can't remember exactly now. It's a long time ago. But yeah, it's a joke. The whole thing. They're ignoring the ApoE. Yeah, Deborah's a 4.3, like Dave Feldman. She'll be a hyper responder. Her LDL will go up. She can eat the same food as me. Her LDL will go up. Mine will just stay flat. And if somebody's a 2-2, their LDL will go down because their chylomicron resonance is so high that basically they just cannot recycle that and produce sufficient VLDL out of their system. So they have longer circulating chylomicron and chylomicron remnants due to genetics. That means it's an adaptation to a higher sugar consumption at some point in the life of that person. So they don't actually cause insulin resistance in the liver. It's all about that, preventing that. The ancestral one was 4-4. Then as the interglacial period is when we changed our diet, go and check the video. You'll understand what I mean. Anyway, and that will get some viewing time for Pim as well, for her channel. Desiccated oysters, a good supplement option if one is following a protocol to up selenium and zinc. Yeah, they're probably okay. Yep. You may lose a few nutrients as a desiccated supplement. You won't lose minerals. That's one thing you don't really lose much. You lose some of the other, the B vitamins and those sort of things. You sort of lose taurine a bit. But in terms of minerals, which you may need, it's fine, in that regard. I prefer fresh oysters, but that's me. But I can access them as well in a very clean environment down here, so I'm lucky in that regard. But yeah, I probably, if I was somewhere else where I couldn't access fresh oysters, I'd probably consider the desiccated option. Dean? Yeah, that's the problem with the modern method. They sort of cook, they throw away the water, they'll put new water, fresh water in. You lose a lot of nutrients, B vitamins, taurine, a lot of things in the sort of stuff. That's a big problem. But you still do find some canneries, Lukey, in Scandinavia, in places like Russia, a few other parts of the world where they still do traditional canning. Eastern Europe, traditional canning is still done. But it is dying. It's small companies that are just still doing traditional canning, but the large companies are pretty much abandoned, Yeah, they highly pasteurize their stuff nowadays, and you lose a lot of nutrition as a consequence. Yeah, a lot of canned stuff is now going down the same road, as milk went down. So you're ending up with a lot of macros and a much poorer micronutrient, and other components, beneficial components are being eliminated. So, yeah, it's appalling, but that's the reality. It's all about maximizing profits, pretty much. I read the body renews 100% every 8 to 10 years. Yeah, it's about 7 if you're optimal. That means if your health is completely optimal, it's about 7 to 8 years. So technically, would take some new to carnivore to reap full benefits. I know improvements are fast, but for complete benefits, yes, exactly. Yes, that's what I've been saying to people for a long time. Be patient. It takes time to heal. And even when you're actually causing, like with reverse electron transport through more saturated fats to biogenesis, new mitochondria. If those mitochondria are already damaged or only cloning and original stuff that's already damaged, yeah, you're getting a bit more benefit, but not a lot more benefit. So it takes time for melatonin, for things like taurine and other things to heal and repair a lot of the tissue and even the mitochondria as well. So, and that can take some time for that tissue to be repaired, renewed, turned over. So new stem cells to turn over certain. So you can take products like Cerule. You can actually also vitamin D and exercise and fasting and other things that have can actually enhance those things as well. So you can actually do a number of those things as you're doing the diet as well. The lifestyle, add other lifestyle factors that can actually help over time as well. So, there's more than one way of skinning a cat, as they say, in terms of fixing things. Yeah, it's good. It's good that you're actually prioritizing to try and get fresh stuff. You're going to get better nutritional value from it long term. So good to hear. G'day, Tracy. Recovering from second jabber over here, hospital for 9 days, unable to walk or barely move, severely fatigued, weakness continues almost 3 months later, all test negative and within a normal range. Yeah, look, that's why I did that other video to actually show that there is a lot of fatigue issues. There's a lot of, it seems like look, from some of the research that I've looked at, it seems to have a negative effect on the mitochondria themselves. And it's the same thing like with even the virus itself does. It seems to force a certain state of glycolysis and suppresses the mitochondria. But once it gets cleared out, the mitochondria sort of recover. It doesn't seem to happen with the jabbering. And it seems like there's this sort of low-grade reactivity inside the cell, with these foreign proteins that are probably interfering with the mitochondria as well. Nobody's done any research. Now we're just sheer speculating. But even when people recover, the thing that I've noticed from the research, what they've actually noticed is that people have poor immune function, either going into the actual disease or the jabbering. Especially these type of, we're not talking about Novavax here. We're talking about the mRNA viral vector, those types that are non-traditional. They're not all. Let's call them the non-traditional jabbering options that have been with us in the last year or so. That's a big problem for a lot of people. Now, I'm going to actually put that protocol in the description, so when people will be able to access it and download the file for those meds. Now, I don't know whether people can access the meds through their doctor, or I don't know. I'll leave it up to you how you access that. I'll just provide you with the information in that regard. But yeah, look, I've known a lot of people that have actually had a lot of issues. One guy is still not returned back to work. He had cancer in the past, and he had poor T lymphocytes. And after the second one, he was hospitalised, and I still haven't heard back. I don't even know how bad he is or how long he's still recovering, or I haven't seen anything to indicate that he's dead yet. But he's in a really bad state from what I've seen, and he still hasn't returned back to work, and it's months, now. It's because I spoke to people, and he had already been away for about well over a month, and then I've been for over now it's nearly getting to 3 months. It's something like 4 months, and still haven't heard anything back from that guy. So it is really important, whether from the real disease or not. It's really important that you have a strong immune system, Tracy. Really important. Um, it may be worthwhile doing, and it may be really hard for you. And maybe you do a 36-hour dry fast rather than a wet fast if you can manage it. I don't know. If you can't, try and do a 3-day fast. It's not an easy thing, but if you can kill off a lot of the old immune system and then rebuild with vitamin D levels, like 20,000 IU's, taking menaquinone 4 as well, or getting in brie, Gouda, and stuff like that in your diet to be able to provide you with enough menaquinone 4, the vitamin K2, that is. It's not as if you're doing it for a long time at 100,000 IU, so I don't think it's a big problem in that regard. But I have to sort of, duty of sort of, if I'm advising people, I need to basically cover myself in that regard. But basically, taking 20,000 IU's and taking about, I would go much higher. I do I'm shifted to 6 grams just before I do Novavax. So I'm doing for a lot of period of time now of, sort of rebuilding my immune system before I go for that option. Because I don't think my work will basically tolerate forever. They've agreed that the other ones are potential risks for me with my previous cardiovascular issues and all that. So they're laying off for that reason. But the mandate is still there. So it hasn't been removed. So and now that I've got a few people that have basically already done it and actually provided me back with their blood works, and it looks, fairly good. Phase 3 was good. They've had no adverse effects in the two critical areas that I was concerned. And I'm boosting up my T lymphocytes, so I can do a very rapid clearing out of my system. As I said, I was getting all negatives from the actual disease itself. That's why I keep it there, just to remind you guys. So good immune system will rapidly clear out stuff. So I would say that would help to rebuild. But I will add that protocol that those doctors are using in the US in terms of dealing with long COVID type thing. It will work with other people with the jabbering stuff as well. So that's all I've got at this stage. If you can't access those, then you really need to rebuild your immune system, and that's going to happen with taurine and vitamin D. No other option that's available at this stage anyway that we can use over the counter. Unfortunately, it's limited, and even things like ivermectin have been banned in Australia and a number of other places. It's ridiculous. It's just, what can one say? Yeah, it's outrageous, actually, to be honest. Especially when the Pfizer groups, they're actually created a new medication which is a modified version of ivermectin. Go figure. Whose interest are they really? Yeah, I'll leave that for you guys to. I think you guys know what I mean. Anyway, see ya, wacky toaster. You get some good sleep. And taurine actually will increase your GABA and improve your melatonin and improve your sleep quality as well. But it doesn't basically, like, it regulates those sort of things. It doesn't sort of increase melatonin. So you don't, some people actually get a bit of drowsiness in the day when they have high doses. Maybe there are a few other things happening there. I'm not sure. But generally speaking, it's supposed to be a regulator. It regulates a lot of these things. It sort of doesn't stop cortisol. It regulates it. So it has a regulatory effect on all these, like the electrolytes and all that. It's a regulator rather than actually like a blunt instrument. That's the nice thing about taurine. It's a more of a soft adjuster, which is a regulator rather than trying to, like a blunt instrument that some medications can be. We keep finding more and more things that are told us were incorrect. Yes, exactly, Scotty. Now it is the thing that Jabba only stays in the system for 2 days. Now research up to 8 weeks exactly. I put a posting just recently on the study, but remember they only did the study for eight weeks, as I pointed out. So if anybody hasn't seen, in my community page, I've actually put the information there. Probably Scotty's probably already seen it. And it's basically the study that talks about the 8 weeks, but the study was only conducted for 8 weeks. What about 10 weeks, 20 weeks, 30 weeks? We're hearing people up to 8 months are still having all sorts of problems. So, so it's quite prevalent, these problems. A lot of people are just putting it down to, I've always, when they get this low grade, they just put, I'm just getting old and all that. But people that are having slightly worse than just their traditional, I'm feeling rat shit, those people are noticing it. And there are more and more people. And if you take a look at the official websites, they're actually talking about the myocarditis and all these other symptoms. And even the guy that actually went and did the actual test, he actually said that they actually had the information there. This was the only test the myocarditis one, that they actually had a little thing that telling people that they can get it through Medicare and stuff like that, or certain stuff they can and certain stuff they can't. So they must be getting a lot of requests for this, for them to basically have to put a sign at at this company that was doing the testing. So, otherwise, if it was just the normal run-of-the-mill business, why would they put a sign up? So there's definitely an increase in myocarditis and all that sort of stuff amongst the population. And even some of the information that got released by that judge forcing, some of the information out that Pfizer tried to keep under wrap for 75 years. Some of that information is starting to get out now, and we're realizing, and this is I suspect if they do a follow up with these people in 8 months' time or whatever, these people still have problems. Let's not forget. Remember when I said, should you take the Jabba the Hutt thing? That video that I did, and I actually, if you go and actually search, should I take the Jabba? Harry Serpanos, you'll find that video, and I actually talk about the oncology research where oncologists are warning their own patients that they could have adverse reactions to this mRNA technology up to 2 years. This is oncologists telling their cancer patients, you could have up to 2 years adverse reactions if you've used this therapeutic approach. Yeah, we've known it's been around for quite a few decades, as the experts tell us, but they don't tell us about the adverse effects that happened in oncology. Did they? No. Because that doesn't work with the narrative. Big fly just came in. Damn, that's annoying. And I hate flies. So that's going to be very annoying, double annoying. My great-grandfather used to take a shotgun out and shoot them with salt in his pistol. Shelley, how are you? I'm being harassed by a fly. Fuck off. I'm going to have to get rid of it. It'll drive me up the wall. It's a Serpanos thing. We go insane. Otherwise, you'll see me going deranged. Give me a sec. I trapped it in another room. Can't be bothered trying to chase it down. I hate flies. I really hate flies. So, just in case another one comes in. Barbados? Oh, that was in regards to my issues. Thanks, Joel. Yeah, I think it's been rough for everyone, not only me. So I'm just glad they've laid off for the time being. Yeah, you got to be patient slowly as your body adjusts, you know. That's why you need to sort of test and see and make the slight adjustments. Son booked for Novax, courtesy Coles. Mandate manager wanted him to speak to another holdout, but he didn't realise he was being used. Another form of coercion. He didn't buy that way. Yeah, fatty fin. Yeah, it's always a bit of a problem, but at least he's been given the option. They've laid off him and all that. Yeah, Woolies was much worse. You know, Coles came into it later on, so it's only more recent. Why are they bothering? Yeah, but anyway, at least he's got a relatively safer option, and that's what it is, because you know it still hasn't gone through the 5 to 7 years, but looking at it, it is a traditional you know, vaccine. So technically speaking, you'd have to be very lucky to be 1 in a million or a billion people that actually reacted badly to the adjunct, you know, the bark extract that sensitizes. But, you know, we haven't had in the test trials, we had 0 anaphylaxis. But could there be still 1 in a billion people? Potentially. But still, it's going to be much lower than any potential. We haven't had any recorded adverse effects whatsoever. So it seems like it's a traditional method, which with some of the safety features that they put in, remember you can't cleave off the spike because it's actually got a mutated, you know, the actual bond, so the body can't cleave it off. So all it can do is just envelop it and basically just remove it from the body, which is good in that regard. So it's got some safety. Then it's got the other safety where the prolines can't actually go into the cell or bind against any surface very easily because of the prolines that are preventing that from happening. So that there are a number of safety features. I have to because when I look at some of the other, even other traditional ones, I did not see any of those safety features in there. So if somebody doesn't get aspirated, properly, um, there are no safety features. So if some of that, even though it's a very small amount, it can still circulate around the body, break up, and actually cause some reactivity potentially. It's going to be much lower than something replicating and creating a massive volume of foreign protein particles. There's going to be one, it's night and day the difference, but still you're going to get very little. Here they went out of their way to put into this a lot of safety features, which surprised me because I had no idea. Why would you bother as a company? When it comes to profits and all that, why would you bother? So it never really made sense why they added these additional safety features. Maybe they'd done some trials, and this is the reason why it may have taken them a bit longer to get to market. Maybe they did a few trials with some of the initial spikes. They realized that it actually, they broke up, that caused a bit of reactivity and stuff like that. And they said, how can we make this safer? And they went back to the drawing board and actually added these changes. That's what may have taken them longer to get to market. But at least they basically did add some safety features in there, where the other ones for Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, they will just get out as quick as possible for the quick buck. So even though I don't necessarily take, I'm quite critical about a big pharma in general. But you got to recognize when a company goes out of its way to try and actually improve the safety of its product, especially when it's a provisional product. It's basically an emergency authorization. It's not basically something that has gone through long period of trial. That they went back to the drawing board and added safety features. I've got to take my hat off to them, in that regard. I don't think people need for any coronavirus, whether it's the flu, the common cold, any MERS, Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, any coronavirus, because of the potential. It's better to get natural immunity. Now, I've been exposed, which I was exposed to that other lady, and the one other thing that I've actually included in my repertoire in terms of, I recommend choline, and I recommend, taurine and vitamin D in my sort of protocol in terms of the immune system. But let's not forget that the bronchial tissue, there is an important element of the bronchial tissue where, especially the Omicron variant affects it, where it has to do with basically the lung surfactant. So it's that fluid type of stuff that is within those that protects the sort of the lung, and also helps with gas exchanges. And the lung surfactant can be. This is a video that I was going to do on structural asthma, like my sister had. It can affect the bronchial tissue, in a positive way. If it functions well, it can help improve the functioning of the bronchial tissue when you've got a good lung surfactant. And the lung surfactant, apparently, when it comes to C19 and some of the reactivity of these things, seems to basically get an improvement with basically by adding choline in, that improves the lung surfactant, seems to improve the bronchial tissue as well, and also protect against bronchial pneumonia as well, because there is a smaller risk for some people, very old and frail, that can switch to that. So there's your lung, your normal, the traditional pneumonia, but you can get pneumonia in the bronchial tissue as well. Small amounts of people, but there are risks there as well, especially people that have got a pre-existing bronchitis type or asthma type conditions. They suffer from those. They're a bit more susceptible. So that's another factor in that regard. Now, I would say that if you fall into that category, It's probably, I wasn't suggesting for the previous variants, but with the Omicron variant, I would say probably choline would be a good thing to supplement, in particular, because some people can vary their biosynthesis and how much they can convert, how good a converter are they between methionine and to produce choline. Because methionine actually plays a lot, down through cysteine to taurine, has a big role in a lot of the, when it comes to the methylation side, methyl and stuff like that. And the more you put in, the higher the cysteine sort of stuff increases in your body. And I did that video on methylation that I criticise Dr. Greger on it. If anybody hasn't seen it, go and take a look. So I'm extrapolating from all that and thinking and saying, maybe even people that are okay in their conversion rates, maybe they all should be taking at least a gram of choline for their lung surfactant, especially in the Omicron era. And that's going to be the dominant one. So I've sort of changed my mind a bit, and I'm actually recommending now, if you've got underlying bronchial asthma, whatever, 2 grams of choline. If you've basically got none of those, 1 gram of choline if you've been exposed, in terms of the virus itself. So that's sort of my additional stuff that I'm actually adding to that protocol that I've been talking about. So I'm modifying it. So yeah. So please add choline in. Some people just can eat quite a few, like 8 eggs. How many eggs would it take? It's about, most eggs, whole eggs, I think it's about 147. Let's just go for 145 in terms of milligrams. And so it's just slightly less than 8. So 147, which is if you're getting grass-fed, 7 eggs. You'd have to get 7 eggs into your diet, 6 eggs at a minimum per day to get the same amount, or you can take 1 gram of choline in a supplement. So that's the, so you'd from 6 to 7 eggs, depending on the size of the egg and all that, you'd be getting 1 gram of choline. So basically, if you're eating that amount of eggs, you don't need to supplement choline. But if you're not, if you have adverse reactions to eggs, some people do, I recognise that, then the other option is to consider then basically getting a supplemental choline. Is another option. There are some seafoods as well that can actually add that as well. So there are other options. Yep, that was in regards to the other one. No, it wasn't so much that. It was so much the threats, job loss, benefits being lost, all that sort of stuff. That can really, really stress you when your whole life's been. I mean, other people have worse. Other people lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost their marriages. A lot of, people are far worse circumstances than myself. But no, it's not an enjoyable situation to be under, a lot of duress in that regard. So, yeah. Yeah, apparently at the moment, thanks, Steph. The only solution is, yes, the Novavax, to keep them off my back. Yeah, but I'm glad that I caught it. I've got natural immunity now, so basically with a high T cell, it'll just clear it out so fast. It'll be an irrelevancy. It'll just be a compliance thing to not lose everything. Obviously, I was prepared to go all the way with the other situation, even to court. over the other situation if they had forced me on one of the others. But since they didn't, yeah, it's made it easier, yeah. If there was no Novavax or any traditional vax available, yeah, yeah, I'd be litigating at the moment. I'd be in court fighting them. Yeah, I don't know how successful I would be, and how worse that would be as an outcome for me in the long run. Yeah, but yeah, can be an issue. And if just if you get a good quality pharmaceutical grade, the last one that I bought was, I couldn't get a good one off iHerb, and I actually got one from Amazon, but I'll take a look. I'll put something in my description at the end of the video, the live stream. I'll actually add some, probably later in the afternoon. I just need to basically check to see what's available out there at the moment, because yeah. So I'll put some links on. Yeah, yeah. That's basically, yeah. Colin but trait, B trait, as it's called, bitrate or whatever, is probably your best option. That's the one that I've got as well. But in terms of brands, there are specific companies that have zero fillers. It's just a good pharmaceutical grade. So I'll find you one that actually is a pure pharmaceutical grade that basically doesn't have any fillers or whatsoever, because some of them do have crap in them, and we don't want that sort of stuff at all. We want to avoid completely that stuff. Raymond, good to see you, mate. Not a problem, Gary. Exactly, Shelley. Yeah. Same thing with me, I was on high dose of both, and it was just like, what? I knew that I had something because I had a close contact with her on the weekend, and throughout the whole week with my different days with my brother. So I knew that I'd been exposed. He was around somebody. Yeah, so I was interacting. So definitely in that regard. And with her, I'd hugged her. We'd eaten together. So on the Saturday, pretty much, yeah, had a lot of very close contact with something that's 70 times more virulent. So yeah, I knew, because I knew that 3 days later I had a gut issue, and I always have it when so it was quite clear that I picked something up. And since she was positive, it must have been that, but I was just getting negatives. But so was my brother. He was getting negatives continuously. He's a brother from another mother, but we're very close. And in that regard, he was sleeping with her, kissing, all that sort of stuff. No, had negatives, one after the other. He did five of these high sensitivity ones, a bit more pricier, but and I was negative with both as well. So pretty much it tells you that if you're on a species appropriate diet and out there either taking supplementation or out there, au natural, Shelley, and exposing yourself, maybe riding naked on horseback, maybe. Just Just a thought. You're definitely going to be a hell of a lot safer than the other options that are being provided out there, which are ridiculous in that regard. We get ours from iHerb, or from, if you can't get it from iHerb, then Amazon. And it's, let me just find it. And it's this one right here. I'll actually share the screen. So that's that one there, Bruce. Is it going to come up? Oh, did. So this is the taurine powder, Nature's Life. It's unflavored, and it's, as you can see, taurine as a free form amino acid. It's not bound to anything. There are no fillers, other ingredients, none. There's absolutely nothing. This is a really good company as well. They produce good products. Started up by some vegetarians years ago. So it's bigger now, obviously, but the people that started it up had a basis of making good quality products. And it's quite a good price as well. So this is in a free form amino acid, so nothing bound to anything. You know, it's the way taurine is within the fluids of animal foods. That means it's basically in a free form and it's not bound to any dodgy sort of stuff or whatever. So you'll take it up and your body will be able to use it, convert it, modify it, or whatever, however it wants to, and the body's good at doing that. And it's not a bad price that they've got. It is available. Also, the same product you can find it on places like Amazon as well. Sometimes it can be cheaper on Amazon than iHerb. Sometimes iHerb has it down to $17. They have it cheaper. So, and even on their official website, you can also find it sometimes a bit cheaper. I tend to buy it on iHerb. But yes, in that regard, I'll throw that in. And Neff's already put that in. Thanks, Neff. He's put a link there for it. So, yeah. When you click on that link, whatever your country location, that front part, because that's for Norway, NO, mine is AU for Australia, what it will do is it will change it automatically. So you don't worry about it. Just hit it on the link and you'll just go to it. And that's a good quality one. You don't have to worry about any about it, you know. So have any idea that might cause keratosis, polymerase? Look, it is usually an matrix metalloproteinase derangement of one sort or another. You may have not healed entirely your liver system, or there may be some other thing, whether it's in your environment or whether it's something you're eating or whatever, that's actually activating more matrix metalloproteinases than you should be that doesn't, because if you're getting enough fat soluble vitamins, you should be regulating all that. The other thing the only other thing that I can think of that is also important is one of the B vitamins, which is niacin. Niacin also plays an important role in suppressing matrix metalloproteinases. It's what it sort of protects, because what happens is UV will upregulate MMPs. Niacin will downregulate them as well. Well, the other fat soluble vitamins are regulating them, sort of, lowering them and regulating them, but niacin directly suppresses them in the actual. It's the reason why they put in some of the creams not only retinol but also niacin, B3, for that purpose, for skin. So try niacin. Where are you located, AG? Because that sort of helps with that sort of stuff. I think I've shown you guys before the niacin that I get. Give me a sec. Nicotinic acid. That's the one that I actually get. That's a pharmacy one. You can either get directly from some pharmacies, as long as you tell them, "Oh, I need it because, um, I don't respond well to not to things like statins and stuff like that." So that's the option. And this was my alternative in my cardiovascular days, but I still take it. I take half of that. It's 250, but I snap it in half and take half, which is 125. So that's the version that I take, which is an Australian pharmacy. So I know the quality; it's really high quality. I don't have a worry taking that. Unfortunately, some of the stuff out there, the efficacy or quality of the niacin, I have some issues with. So that's why I don't recommend. I say to people, do your own research. But if you're in Australia, you should be able to get this. So take a snapshot of that. So this is an Australian brand, and what's the company? Mylan is the company, Mylan, which is the company that produces it. And that's basically TGA approved, which is equivalent to the FDA in America, the TGA. So that actually is a pharmacist-only medicine. It's actually considered as a medicine. This is not considered as a supplement. This is for people with, as an alternative to statins. and it's nicotinic acid, which goes through that primary, which is what niacin is, that primary. It's the stuff that gives you a flush. So that's proper pharmaceutical grade niacin. 250, when you see here, it's got 250 milligrams, that is 100%. You get another product, it may say 250, it may only be 100. I'm not kidding you. It can be the quality, because there's no, this has gone through being registered with the government, so they know exactly what the quantities are and stuff like that. So very important. Yes, a wonderful sulfur amino acid. Does so many. It's a Swiss Army knife. I call it the Swiss Army knife, and it's actually not only that, it's completely indicated. It has been preserved within multicellular organisms from the beginning. That's how far back taurine goes. Taurine is part of the earliest form. It was actually, let me just backtrack. We think that it's the first osmolyte to regulate fluids within multicellular organisms. Why? I'll tell you why. This is why it lowers blood pressure. It actually protects the cell from rupture. That means too much fluid going into the cell. So it regulates the fluids. So it's that's why it lowers blood pressure. It brings blood pressure back to the normal range where it should be, because it's osmolyte, which regulates fluids. And they believe, this is researchers, they believe that it was the first regulator, osmolyte, within eukaryotic cells. That means the first multicellular type. So it's a really interesting, it's very ancient, taurine, as a sulfur amino acid. It's been around for a very long time, since early stages of evolution. Every single animal requires it. Every single organism on this planet that is evolved for a very long time requires it, from simple celled animals all the way to mammals and complex, things like us. So it is very ancient. That's how important it is. And Nif's got one there. So what's... there it is. Yes. Okay. So you can get it in other parts of the world as well. Well, there you go. Oh, there you go. You got a link. So... Oops. And Luke, he's done a video for me. Oops. I'm going to have to share this. Share.
Subscribe to Harry's channel or suffer the consequences. Also, repeat and vegans are really dumb. Subscribe Subscribe to Harry's channel or suffer the consequences. Also, repeat and vegans are really dumb.
I better add myself back in. Yes, yes. Fun and games. Fun and games. What? No sound? Oh, God. You mean I shared it with no sound? Hold on. Let's do this again.
Subscribe to Harry's channel or suffer the consequences. Also, repeat and vegans are really dumb. Subscribe to Harry's channel or suffer the consequences. Also, repeat and vegans are really dumb.
Yes. Thank you, Lukey. Thank you for the laughs. That better came through. Blame me. Mine had sound. Richard. Yes. Oops. Yeah, it is. It does improve due to the effect of increasing GABA. So it does improve and lowers cortisol. Obviously, by lowering cortisol, you automatically will increase, melatonin. So it has a positive effect in that regard. Yes. Phil Escott mentioned Laszlo Boris. Yes. Said it isn't possible to deplete deuterium from seed oils ever. It just stays in the body forever. Thoughts? Nah, it doesn't. Obviously, if you're still taking in seed oils, you're never going to get rid of it. But the moment you actually lose fat, as you're losing fat, seed oils will be removed from those fat stores. That's why I usually say to people that for 7 years, if you've been exposed to seed oils for a long time, you need to take a low dose vitamin E in order to for 7 years, low dose vitamin E, the Jarrow one, in order to stabilize and deal with that oxidized PUFA, the damaged PUFA and all that, the stored. Now, in terms of deuterium that's going to be in there, you will deplete, but it's at a very low, slow rate. Yes, but the body still depletes deuterium. So the body does it from direct sunlight. That means if you strip off, take all your clothes off, you're out in the sun, 19 parts per million per hour. So, but if you're not, just generally normal sort of stuff, as long as you're not eating deuterium foods and stuff like that and adding to the problem, the body will slowly over time, it will take a couple of years, but it will over time, as you're losing that body fat, as long as you dilute it as well with normal fat, what will happen is if you're getting like the majority of your energy is coming from, let's say you've got a third coming from your body fat, and let's say it's all poo fat, which is not going to be. It's not going to be all due to that source. So you're probably getting about half from that. So you're probably getting the other half from saturates and monounsaturates and stuff like that. So the level of deuterium is going to be lower. So I'm going to give it, and that's generous because there's, unless, we're talking about, so let's say about 50% of what's coming out, and that's, the other quarter. So it's 124, 130, 255 plus 255 divided by 4. That brings it down to 191. So that's basically considering that half of it is going to come, which is not. You get more MUFA and other things that are going to be stored. So, so let's have to be realistic. 255 plus 130 plus 122. Divide that by 3 is about 169. Then you got to be depleting, if you're out in the sun and all that, you'll deplete a certain quantity of that. So even if you're actually getting a certain level of energy and that amount, you're still going to lower by 19 parts per million. That brings it to 150. So from 255, then add to that some dilution, like half, you're in a carnivore state and half of it's coming from low deuterium stuff. So plus something which is even 120 on average, divide that by 2, you'll be down to 135. So if you're basically on a highly carnivorous diet and you've got a lot of stored PUFA and all that, you can bring your levels all the way down to what your body, and you get out in the sun, you can bring your levels all the way down to about 130, 35 or whatever. Still slightly above the 130 range, but over a number of years, you will actually drop below that eventually. Now, we can do it faster. How do we do it faster? By getting low deuterium, like getting something which is like 105 parts per million, low deuterium water, and actually consuming that with our coffees and many other things, and slowly diluting the levels in our system. So as we're oxidizing the PUFAs that are coming out, we're stabilizing with vitamin E, with the low dose vitamin E, jarrow, and a lot of that. So we're electron doning, stabilizing, or with earthing, we're electron doning, and then that remainder comes out. That will basically go as it goes through the Krebs cycle, it will be removed. Parts of the deuterium will be removed, the ions, and they'll be replaced. And as you go through that, it's a rate limiting effect, yes, but you'll still get a certain level. So I disagree with Phil on that it's permanent. No, it's not. Not at all. So, your body turns over a lot of things and will release things out of fat cells all the time. And there's all sorts of mechanisms that are also, it's in constant flux. It's not a stable thing. And you can deplete by changing, because the body basically can remove that portion of water and replace it with low deuterium water that you're putting in. So it's like all these enzymes can literally take one ion out and put another ion in. They can switch. So the body's very good at doing all that. It depends what you're giving it. If you're continually giving it, obviously, seed oils and stuff like that, or giving it high carbohydrate type things, no. Your ability to deplete is going to be very poor. But it isn't possible. That's unscientific to say that, completely and utterly. To say that, I completely vehemently disagree with that. Your body has systems and mechanisms to deplete deuterium. The rate at which it does depends on enzymes, and how slow they are depends on the influx, how much stuff is coming in. They're regular. I don't think that Phil really understands a lot of this deuterium stuff to that level, and it's probably why he said that. I don't know whether he did. I haven't heard his video, so unless I so I maybe he didn't say that. Maybe he said something different. I don't know what you heard, Deborah. But if you're describing it this way, no. Our bodies are quite good at depleting and removing stuff. So, very good at doing it. G'day, Trouble. It all depends on protocols, my dear. It all depends on protocols. Most people probably only need 2. Most people can get it from the food and don't need to supplement at all. Other people have got oxalates that are depleting their taurine levels, and they may need to take more. They may have specific conditions that they need to take more. But there's a whole lot of reasons. I've got people up to 14 and 15, very high grams of taurine, while I'm only taking about 4. I've gone up to 6 recently, just before Novavax. But that's the only reason I'll drop back to 4, because it's the COVID sort of stuff that's around. I don't want anything coming in. I want it to be cleared away. I don't want any sort of long affecting symptoms of any sort. That's the only reason. Once all this is over, I'll probably shift back to 2 grams a day. So it depends on what people are doing. But when I had a lot of oxalate dumping, I knew I was losing I was actually upping my taurine up to the 8 grams level. But now I'm way down. So it depends, varies for the circumstances. You tell me what your circumstances are, your conditions, your health issues and all that. And then I can tell you exactly what dose to take. There's the email option. Exactly, Tracy. It's way easy. All the nutrients in there are sufficient, and all the other elements are there to regulate. Yep. It's always good to build up to it rather than going straight to it. But I have had people that have gone straight to it that are not on blood pressure meds, and I've had reasons to do that. Oh, how disappointing, Richard. How disappointing. Could help, with animal husbandry. Ferritin levels continue to increase above normal levels on carnivore. Do you think this is ancestrally consistent, or signs that they are consuming too much? Probably not getting enough taurine to regulate their iron levels. So that's because iron is regulated by taurine, and actually can eliminate. They've actually done in rat studies. I haven't done the video, but they've actually overloaded them deliberately to cause iron overload beyond their physiological ability to regulate, and then they throw in taurine, and it brings it back to normal range. Very powerful stuff as a regulator. As I said, it's an osmolyte. It's the Swiss Army knife of regulation throughout the body, and it's indicated through, we're talking about millions of years. Yeah, multicellular, 500 million years ago. So millions of years of basically indicated as an osmolyte. So, yes, powerful stuff, taurine. It's the reason why a number of people with hemochromatosis that have gone on a carnivore diet and undercook their food usually find themselves no longer in that state of hemochromatosis. So, but if people are out there doing things like beef jerky all the time and stuff like that, and overcooking their meat and getting very little, taurine, and also they may have an underlying oxalate issue, which is depleting their taurine levels and other sulfur amino acids, yeah, they could potentially have an issue, So also viruses and pathogens can actually increase your ferritin levels. So can be other issues as well, especially in this COVID era. So it could be a lot of issues. As well, we can't discount those as being other reasons. Many people claim things, but they never go and test. And I go, well, have you tested? No. It's like Frankie used to claim things. I actually emailed him, have you tested? And he said, no, I don't have the money. And I go, well, then why are you claiming that sort of stuff? Yeah. That's the problem with a lot of people. Claim a lot of things without even testing, without even knowing. I claim things, but I do test when I do claim things. There's a difference. And complete git, you're correct. Yeah, as I said, animal husbandry. Oops. Daniel, good to see you, mate. Cheers, mate. Jonathan? That's fine. If you're busy. Yeah, I was running around yesterday. We had a birthday party. So, yes. Which meats taste best, beef, chicken, or pork? Depends on your preference, mate. It depends on your preference. I like all that. Well, I actually like pork and lamb more than chicken and beef. Chicken I find very bland. Probably the drumsticks are the only good part of a chicken. I find the other parts a bit more bland. They're especially the breasts and stuff like that. They just don't do it for me. They're not big enough. Anyway, but pork I love, and I love lamb as well. So I can't really make up I've never been able to make up my mind which do I love more, lamb or pork. I'm split. Yes. So yes. For some, it's easy. Yeah, I love lamb chops. But yeah, when it comes to pork and lamb, I love any part of doesn't matter very much. So yes, this you will not get from me. I'm not a big beef lover. If you put beef in front of me, lamb or pork, I'll literally just take the lamb and the pork to the side, cut it in half, and have half of each. So yeah. And the reality is, if you go back, most people were eating in most parts of the world more lamb, goats, and pork than basically beef. beef was here and there occasionally, even in the US. It's just become more popular now because of due to the way the carnivore community, some of the people that started it in the early days sort of promoted it. But at the end of the day, eat what you like. They're animal foods. They're fine. They're indicated. So whatever makes you happy, whatever you enjoy. Simple as that. HD. I've also done a lot of if you do PUFA and Harry Serpanos, you'll find a whole lot of videos why. I mean, lamb actually even has more PUFA than basically pork in many of its cuts. So some of its cuts it can have double or triple. So it's irrelevant. And PUFA from animal foods is not a problem. First, it's not a large amount, and second, the way it's in the matrix of the fat cells, it's irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. It's just nonsense. Even if you overcook it, like 2 hours, you only get trace amounts of any oxidative products. It's just completely and utter irrelevant. And why would you cook it for so long and dry it out completely? The only time you actually get, remember that study that I showed you guys? Some of you guys have probably seen it had to cook it over 30 hours before you actually got anywhere where it actually became a problem. Who would cook it that long? It'd be charred like mad. I mean, give us a break. Not an issue. But people just need to type in PUFA Harry Serpanos and they'll find those videos. They're very good videos with a lot of good information. Yeah, don't waste your time. You'll be a hyper responder. All that will do is you'll actually have a doctor upsetting you with their nonsense. I love bacon. I love bacon. Yeah, I can eat bacon every day. God, that's how much I love it. Sounds good, Daniel. Everybody finds their way. Yeah, on the ApoE4 stuff, I was arguing with a company. Dave did his gene testing through. They ignored Dave in enhanced data indicating the longer living were LMHR types pointing to other countries, 100 plus. Look, a lot of these people don't realize that people who are these lower responders that have got an ApoE of 2.2, they tend to be in societies like in the around the world, which tend to be much cleaner, their environment, much lower in deuterium as well. Their water sources are lower in deuterium, like in that Siberian village where their water source is very low in deuterium. It just happens to be. And they just spray that on all the foods that they eat and even the animals that they feed. They provide drinking water in themselves. So they have a very low deuterium sort of intake. So there are a whole lot of factors why certain populations, we see it. People leave Japan, they go to the US, and they basically become just as sick as the US population. So, yeah, it's just nonsense. And nothing to do with genetics. It's just the way genetics work in some groups. The difference is that the clearance of an ApoE4 is much of a chylomicron remnant is rapid, which basically means you put a lot of fat into your liver at the same time, as unfortunately there may be a lot of sugar and that can create a problem. Or even if you put it in there and there is no sugar, you're going to be exporting much more of it, much more rapidly and quicker. But if you're an ApoE33 or 22, that fat that you've just eaten, after it's circulated around for some time, it will stay in the system for longer. Remember, they don't measure chylomicrons. They measure basically LDL. If it's not going into the liver to be converted and re-exported out, so you can actually then have less chylomicrons and more LDL. It's the same energy. It's just in a different vehicle. That's all it is. So the ApoE determines whether the vehicle has more LDL in the system or more chylomicron and remnant chylomicron circulating. That's all. It's the same amount. If I have two people, one's got an ApoE of 4.4, 3.3, and 2.2, three people, let's say, and I give them the same meal. They fasted and then they have the same meal. The one with the 4.4 will rapidly take it up the receptor sites because the HDL will pass on the key, the magic key, giving it in to be able to get into the liver, be re-exported out rapidly as VLDL, and then as it goes and gives energy, it'll shrink down to an LDL. So you'll end up with more LDL in the system. On the other hand, if you've got a 3.3, less of it will go in, less will be exported out. If you've got a 2.2, even lower levels. And so you'll have more circulating. It's the same amount of energy. It's just circulating in different boats. But if you're only measuring these boats, the LDL boats, but ignoring the other ones, you're not measuring them, obviously you'll say, oh, there's more. But the reality is that's because of the ApoE. That's all it is. It's ridiculous. Is the LDL oxidized or not? Is it glycated with a lot of sugar? Is it oxidized because you put a whole lot of seed oil in there and it's inside and esterified with the cholesterol? Those fatty acids are highly reactive. That's what people need to be asking, because that's what the original, lipid peroxidation studies that were done in the 80s actually showed. And then those doctors, those friggin' criminal doctors, recommended statins rather than saying we need to remove this garbage out of the food supply, which was contraindicated. It's bullshit. This is a problem that people just do not understand energy management due to HDL and the ApoE receptor and the genetics that transcript that. So do you get the quick key or the slow key? If you get the slow key, you're going to have lower LDL. If you get the quick key, you're going to have higher LDL. But the amount of energy that's just come in is just circulating in different boats. It's just freaking crazy. Just because you don't measure something, if you want to do proper lipid panels, you need to measure everything. And when you do that, you'll realize it's the same energy. It's just in different rafts, different boats circulating around. So, and these people would be basically at a basal level. That means the same weight, the same height, and all that. So they have that similar basal energy usage after being fasted. So in that regard, you'd know that a certain rate of energy is going to be used from the circulating, but because of their different genetics, the remainder is going to be in different boats, and it's going to be very close to each other. It's just nonsense, and more nonsense. So yeah, never ends. Crazy stuff. Bill Schindler saying cheese that have any acid in the ingredients have this in them, and they don't have it naturally ferment and lead to less lactose breaking down. This equals bad. And I mean, one thing I've never heard of the guy. And whether, the difference between cheeses in terms of the sugar content is very little. There's not much difference. Maybe a gram or half a gram difference. It's negligible. It's not going to make the difference whatsoever. You either don't react well to lactose or you do. You either can clear it or you can't. So the minute amount of difference between one cheese and another is so minute, like half a gram or a gram, within 100 grams or 3.5 ounces. How much difference is that going to make? When most people can still be ketotic at 25 grams net. So it's going to be negligible. Most, even the yogurt, even things like yogurt, which is much higher, usually only has per 100 mil or 100 grams or 3.5 ounces, has about 4 or 5. And we're talking about plain yogurt here, 4 or 5 grams. You could do 500 to get to 25 and you'd still be in ketosis. You could do, and cheese has actually even lower than that, around the 4 at the highest end. So even there, you could do quite a bit of cheese before you basically even hit your threshold of basically being popped out of ketosis. So what is it? People are just bored with their life and they just need to find another thing to scare people with. Oh, it's 1 extra gram. It's going to kill you. Yeah, whatever. Ridiculous, AG. Ridiculous. This is the problem with so-called gurus. They go out there and magnify things out of proportion. It's going to be the end of the world. Oh, yes. Whatever. Yes. That's why I get bored with these people. They're annoying. They're annoying, AG. You shouldn't be listening to these people. Just use your common sense. Even common sense will tell you there's so much, in that. Can I do so many grams? Can I basically, is it going to affect my ketosis? No. You can do the experiment. I've done the experiments. When I was doing heavy keto even, and I was doing up to 25 grams, and I was still having something like 3 millimoles. I mean, what? This guy's going to tell me? That's just nonsense. And this equals bad. Just the word saying this equals bad is ridiculous. God almighty. Exactly. Yeah, a lot of these people had ApoE, 4. I mean, that's what the chimps have. That's what a lot of mammals have. And it's only these interglacial periods where we were accessing more sugar that shift happened. And that's not a lot of sugar. That's small amounts. ApoE33 happened about 200,000 years ago, and it became the most dominant, the ApoE33. And then the ApoE22 happened about around about between 100,000 and 80,000 years ago. And that was another sort of interglacial period as well. And that's when this is an approximate based on what is called gene archaeology, where they look at those evolutionary pressures and how certain genes evolve and change over time, and they look at certain biomarkers to actually indicate, based on the proteins, how this shift has actually happened, and that's how they've been able to extrapolate approximate these periods. Now, they're not exactly precise, so it's not 80,000 years exactly on the dot or 200,000 years exactly on the dot, approximately around that sort of period. These genetics ApoE changes actually happened. But the reality is, yes, even Mary Ruddock, when she actually was recently in Africa, she'd actually met a number of centenarians amongst these tribal populations, including the Maasai. So they just have high infant mortality. That's all it is. When people say, my great-grandfather lived 107 on my father's side, but the infant mortality was very high. My grandmother, she basically lost six of her kids, and only 4 of the 10 survived. So she had a 60% loss. So that can really affect the infant. That infant mortality can really affect the data, saying, the average life expectancy is 40. Yeah, because more than half the children are wiped out before they even get a foothold on planet Earth. Give us a break. It is just nonsense. And when it comes to ancestral populations, we've got no idea how long they lived. Absolutely no idea. That's just bullshit. Just because we find children buried around the campfires, because obviously children didn't go out hunting. They died at infancy, if they died, and they would be buried close by. So the numbers of children in those burial sites close by are much larger than the adult ones, because the adults in many times died out on the hunt or got bitten by a snake and died or whatever. So they never even got back to be buried close by. So yes, it's nonsense. Most of that sort of stuff. That's why it's unreliable. It's completely and utterly nonsense. Anybody that uses average life expectancy data from the past, which is all extrapolated, which means adjusted, which basically means fabricated, and how well the fabrication happens depending on what agenda you're running. We have to ignore average life expectancies of our ancestors because in terms of the data, in terms of record keeping in the past, is irrelevant. It's very poor. The other thing is a lot of these societies were upended in different ways due to calamities. So there are a whole lot of factors. We today live in an environment where it's pretty safe. You got a police force, you got a lot of things that keep things relatively, depending on the society you're living in, but relatively most societies are fairly safe. So the death rates are much lower. Really good medicine and many other things. You go back in those societies, the death rate was much higher. That's why they used to have so many children, because you did not know how many would survive. Not many did, do all sorts of calamities and whatever. Warfare. There's all sorts of calamities that actually killed off a lot of people. So infant mortality and loss in warfare and all that is irrelevant. If we're really going to look at, we should be looking at how many people live on average within our society over the age of, let's say, 70 or 80 or stuff like that. That's the sort of comparison. And we can only do that in more recent times because we've got data. If we go back in the past, we don't have much data. And when we look at that, in the last couple of decades, there's not a massive difference. And then you'd also have to adjust it based on the population. You'd have to do it on the actual numbers of the population and make some sort of adjustment. So the moment you make an adjustment is who's making the adjustment and how are they making the statistical adjustment for that. It's, as you can understand, it's prone to bias and miscalculations of all sorts. So yeah. Damn, just my just lost my location. So I'm really behind on the StreamYard, and StreamYard just basically just is. Unfortunately, I've lost a few of the questions. Restream. Restream is a bit like this. It will basically truncate. So if I've missed your, because I've gone on a ramble, you may have to put it back in. Just the way it is. Yes. So this is the first one on the top. So, and I just noticed there was one of Bruce's there on veggies and stuff like that. I just lost that because it just vanished. So yeah, it unfortunately does this. It's an annoying thing, but it does it. Yep, it does. It does all that sort of stuff. Yep, good stuff. Well, that's how I got rid of my fibrosis in my heart completely and reduced substantially in the left lung, which was, as my doctor described it, precancerous. So, yes, that now is down to 2019 was the last test. Still haven't gone and done because of all the too much compliance to basically get any tests. Oh, we don't take it now. No, I forgot all about it, but I still have to go and do it. Find out, am I close to zero now, or I've still got a bit, or do I need to up my taurine levels again? No, it definitely isn't too bad. It's easy to do. I did a 3.5 day dry fast. That's a bit tougher. Much easier. I did a 6-day fast. That's easy. I can do a 6-day fast. Tried doing a dry fast for a couple of days. That's hard. It's hard. I've done it twice, and first time I only managed a day and a half, and I gave up. It was just too bloody hard. And the next time I did it for 3.5 days, which was the last time I did it, and that was hard as well. And the worst thing that you can do in a dry fast, never do this, guy. Never have any fluid at cold. Forget it. You're going to die at room temperature because your whole digestive tract is turned off. It's gone to sleep, and there's a lot of blood circulation, so it's there's no warmth there. So the moment you have something at room temperature, my whole esophagus felt like it was freezing, like it was in a freezer. Like I just thrown myself into a freezer and shut the top. That's how it felt. So it was an hour. I had to literally get some boil some water and put it into a jug to really warm my throat up again. It was just ridiculous. So yeah, that was an experience, because normally I usually used to break with like a bone broth, which is warm, so it wasn't a problem the first time and other times. But this time, for some reason, the thirst got to me, and I had to have a glass of water. But it was the worst thing I ever did. Have a warm coffee if you're going to have any fluids. A warm coffee. It's just really hard if you've done a dry fast on the esophagus. God almighty, it's like, ugh. I'm going to have to move because I'm very fast, because I'm losing people as this stream thing bloody keeps moving up on me. Yes. Heard that a person died from blood cancer, was put on a ventilator and died less than 48 hours. He did all that supposedly right, and I suspect complications being smothered by Jabba the Hutt. Look, lest we test, we don't know. Yep, it's, as I said, I've had a co-worker that's been in that sort of situation as well. Yeah, it is currently, because there's not enough testing. Yeah, I know. It's look, most of the people have actually already covered. So what's the purpose of this? It's just ridiculous. You may have to go a bit higher than that to get it up to those sort of levels. G'day, Lukey.
Hello, Harry. Hello, everyone.
Where Lukey, on the other hand, is super, super, super high. Like he's like a sun god, you know. He's super high on vitamin D. 98. There's 98 basically in the nanograms. If you divide that by 2.5, is about 39.2. That's just slightly below 40. And while I wouldn't call it deficient, but I would just call it maybe sufficient. So it's not going to cut it at all if you want to get to any therapeutic level or protective level. You got to be at least 60 plus to be at a protective level, which is basically in yours 60 times 2.5 is 150. Be in a really protective way. You've got to be over 100 at a minimum, but 150 if you want to be in a protective way. In a therapeutic state, like Lukey, to switch off autoimmune disease, you've got to be up to 200, which is basically 80. So 200 in your measurements, 80 in the nanograms, the US measurement, to basically get to the therapeutic levels, to switch off, to modulate all the genes, the 1200 plus genes. So, yeah, pretty much. I'm falling so behind on today's stream. Sort of joke.
I've noticed.
I can't even keep up with it and for some reason, Restream seems to be faster in the way it actually truncates things. I don't know whether they've made a change. I can't even give my long answers anymore, and otherwise I lose so many people.
Right. That's.
I would say if you're feeling with enzymes, you're not feeling that great, I would say that sounds like a gallbladder issue. Up your taurine to emulsify and clear the stuff out, and you'll have some really runny days and some constipated days until that all sorts itself out, unfortunately. Yeah, look, I know, Nick. Some places, depending on where you are, even in a certain country where it may be available, some parts like of Australia have actually already done it, have already provided it, and people have actually already had it. And some places like with where I'm at, it'll be available tomorrow for the first time in Hobart, the 21st. And that's only in Hobart. There's up north, there have been pharmacies that have actually had bookings much earlier. But down in the south, where the capital is, you tell me, I don't, crazy idea. Yes. Is it because the current political party in government gets more votes from up north of the state than the south of the state in Tasmania? Maybe that's why those people are getting quicker priority compared to the people in the south, because they've got more to lose politically because some of their own supporters are very much conservatives and really pissed off with their government. Yes, I suspect that may be a reason why they're prioritising those northern people. Am I conspiratorial? I'll leave that for you to ponder. But yeah, in Tasmania, it was in the southern parts. It was only available, and only one pharmacy has it at the moment. The other pharmacies have put in for it, but they haven't actually got any feedback. So their paperwork hasn't been processed. I don't know why. Don't tell me. The only pharmacy is across the river in Rosny. So I have to go across the river. I can't even get it on this side of the river, So ridiculous. So we've actually been Hello Kitty have booked for the 28th, which is not this Monday, but the following Monday, because she's under the same pressure as well to get it done or lose her job. So she's under even more pressure that not even giving her. She's actually on leave at the time, at this moment, because if she goes back and she hasn't, basically, they will take proceedings against her. So she's under even more pressure than me, where I'm basically they've taken the pressure off and said, when you sort out the Novavax, then let us know, and then we'll put the paperwork through, and they'll leave me alone. But they've pretty much got HR off my back, which is the key thing. So, yes, I was surprised that management will go in to bat for me, but they did. Maybe they do really need me, or they want me, whatever. Look, I have a good relationship with my colleagues, so I've never had that, and at the same time, they know I'm good at doing my work, so never had an issue there. So I suspect they had motivations to go in and bat for me. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, but at the moment things are all over the place. What's happening in Brazil with your situation, compliance options? Do they have Novavax there or not, or what's it?
As far as I know, no Novavax inside, and yeah. Um, I think nothing's changed dramatically since last week, but I don't. The Carnival is coming up, and I don't know what's going to happen. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, I'm not going," you know.
Well, that's the thing that I was actually thinking about. Carnival's not too far away, and they were talking about, like, last time. I remember seeing a YouTube report out of Brazil, and they were actually talking about the Carnival, and are the mandates going to be lifted by then or not?
I don't think they're going to. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but it's funny because at least in terms of official numbers, whatever they mean, it's like people have gotten used to like 900 something deaths a day, and it used to be supposedly it reached up to 4,000 in the heights. So they say it's not that bad right now, but their reactions to this aren't consistent because if you go back a year, it's like,
well, first of all, if you go back a year, they were saying if you take the jab, you're not going to you're going to be protected, and you're not going to transmit. Well, they're up to 4 jabs in Israel, and 100% of their people in the hospitals at the moment are all jabbed, double or triple jabbed or quadruple jabbed.
Yep.
So, and the same death rate within the same amount of people, which is that 80 plus population, the frail and all that, are the same population on average, which we're finding. It doesn't surprise me. It's the same thing with the flu season. People take the flu jab, same numbers. We get flu season after flu season after flu season. Vulnerable people with poor immune systems will die in greater numbers than those otherwise. It's bullshit. No coronavirus can actually be stopped. What you're supposed to happen is you get some level of antibody capacity to deal with it. The problem is if you have got a deranged, weak immune system, it's not going to do much for you. The better option is to basically get your vitamin D levels and eat some meat to get your taurine levels. That's going to be more protective. But if you go into a nursing home, you're going to be fed kibble and kept out of the sun.
Yep.
So
Dude, it's honestly terrible because my dad's mother, she died like a few years ago. I was quite young. I can't really remember it. But it's funny because she used to be in decent health, but as soon as she went to the hospital, it's like
exactly.
everything crashed down.
Yeah. Well, first of all, in the old hospitals, they used to feed people raw milk and put them out in the sun. And we
Yep.
know raw milk has lactoferrin, and lactoferrin increases interferon, which is a key element of your immune system. So what do? They boosted their vitamin D levels to boost their T lymphocytes, to clear out viruses and pathogens, and to also kill off senescent and cancer cells with higher T lymphocytes in the system. And on top of that, they were having, in those days, they were eating 2/3 of their diet was coming from animal foods and 1/3 from plants. The complete opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Those people were way more robust. So it's absolute nonsense. And like Dean here is asking about, look, free range and unpasteurized is much better, and organic is much better, because glyphosate is a access as a basically antibiotic, and it's like taking an antibiotic every day, especially if you're eating plants. You're actually consuming antibiotics constantly because it's got an antibiotic mimicking effect. And it's been basically registered in the patent office of a number of countries by Monsanto. So, not me saying it, Monsanto themselves claim that it has an antibiotic effect, and they have patented it specifically for that purpose. I've always said glyphosate compared to the other pesticides is much safer as a pesticide. As a pesticide, it's way safer. It causes less problems compared to DDT and a whole lot of other pesticides, which are much more poisonous to the body in terms of that. The problem with glyphosate is not so poisonous to the body; it's poisonous to the mitochondria, and it's poisonous to the bacteria in our gut. So it's actually affecting our energy production on the one hand. Probably another factor why we're getting fatter faster, because we're engaging the Randall cycle with reduced mitochondrial efficiency at a much lower gradient of mixed macros. And with the current high load of mixed macros, obviously we are engaging it at a very significant level under those circumstances in the long run. So definitely, having cleaner food supply is way better. But at the end of the day, if there are people out there, because animals are great depleters of a lot of these pesticides and herbicides and stuff like that, they will clean these things out of their system. They do have phase 1 and phase 2 detox pathways to do that. So compared to a plant, they'll have far less. So if I'm looking at prioritizing for poor people, your regular meats and stuff compared to plants, it's night and day between the two. But obviously for optimal, free range, pastured stuff like that's going to be much better. Unpasteurized raw milk is going to be superior. But we've got to be realistic. The middle ground for the average majority of population is probably the other stuff. If you can afford the better stuff, way better. Not everyone can. Just keep that in mind, Dean. It's different saying optimal and different saying what can people afford. We have to be quite clear about that in that regard. It's jumped again. This is frustrating. I just lost a whole lot of other questions. Sorry, guys. It's just Can't do anything about it. It's just the way this live stream is speeding. Don't know, can I? Is there a way? What are the options here? Look, I'll have to investigate it. I'll have to investigate it for next week. It just seems the chat window. No, nothing under the settings. The chat window is actually moving faster and actually truncating quicker. So I'm losing stuff. Yeah, what can you say? Yeah, anyway. Yeah, look, there are people with sensitivities. There are all sorts of things as well. But at the same time, the differences between free range and the regular stuff isn't like night and day substantially. Even free range, how free range is it? If you've got a pasture right next door that's got glyphosate on it and you've got organic on one side, do you think the wind doesn't blow? Can't contaminate and cross-contaminate? I say to people, eat the food you can afford. If you can afford, cleaner, it's good to support such producers because we do want them around for longer. But don't have this sort of, let's say, delusion that that in the current food environment and industrial society that we're living in, that everything is perfect and, there's contaminants all over the place. That's the reality. That's why I don't subscribe to all these people saying, I'm going to take sulforaphane and all these other hormetic stressors. I get enough hormesis from my own freaking environment in terms of non-native EMFs and everything else under the sun. I don't need to add more poison to my body, to get a hormetic effect.
Like this is funny. I'm tired of hearing this. There's actually an endocrinologist here in the low carb Brazilian community, and she says that carnivore isn't that good because you don't get phytochemicals to improve your antioxidant pathways. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah. So she's never heard of non-native EMF. She's never heard of particulates coming out of the exhaust pipe of a vehicle.
Right.
She's never basically heard of other stressors on her body. So she needs to basically go and pay for additional stress. Fantastic. Yes. People are crazy. I can see all those Maasai lining up for those sulforaphane supplements. Yes.
Oh god.
They are truly missing out, those poor Maasai and those poor Inuit. They missed out so much. They were deprived. We should ship them a couple of container loads.
I don't know if you have heard this, but the mainstream, they are in such big denial about the Maasai
They're selling
diet.
product.
Yeah, but they'll say things like, so I've heard that there is sometimes they'll eat, there's a root, they'll make soup with it sometimes, and some guys say that this root has magical cholesterol lowering properties. And that's what's keeping them from dying.
It's a fucking great earner as well for someone.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Absolute nonsense.
Delusional.
Delusional beyond a joke in that regard. Do you think Bart's a bit too dogmatic on certain nutritional things like not 1 gram of carb ever? Or do you generally agree with him? He's right on the money. I would say on the thing, do you require any carbohydrates? No. 0 is required. Can you tolerate some level of carbohydrates? That's a different question altogether. Yes, you can. And that will vary between people. Can you tolerate eggs? That will vary between people. Can you tolerate milk? That will vary between people. Can you tolerate a lot of things? That will seafood. Some people can tolerate it on even a carnivore diet. Some can't, for a whole lot of reasons. So there are so many variables. And I think Bart would agree with me on that. Can you produce all the glucose you require? Yes, you don't need to have even 1 gram. You don't need to consume. Having a small amount from dairy, is it going to kill you? No. Is it going to be a problem? No. Is it optimal? Probably not. Is it gonna cause you any issues? No, major. If you've basically got a high clearance in that regard, you're like the Maasai. You're physically active. You have 2 glasses of milk that probably give you basically about you get about all up probably about 17, 18 grams of sugar.
Yep.
You're still going to be in ketosis, low grade ketosis. Most of that going to go to glycogen anyway. So it just means that you're going to produce less through gluconeogenesis. And it's also a lower deuterium type source of sugar as well. As I've said, there are sugars and sugars. They can start from the 140 odd right up to the 160 odd. And milk sugar is at that bottom sort of level. So it's not a big thing. And as long as you're only getting a very small amount, your body there's enough enzymes there to basically through the Krebs cycle to deplete sufficient deuterium. It's not an issue because most of the other stuff are all long chain saturates, which are basically low in deuterium, which is fine. So it's a very much a non-issue. Now, obviously, if you were to basically be consuming like liters and liters every day, that definitely could be an issue. You're definitely not being ketosis. Let's put it that way. Even low-grade ketosis, and low-grade ketosis is a good thing to basically be swinging in and out. That's what you really want. You don't want to be in ketosis continuously, but you don't want to be, in growth continually either. Not a good thing. Your body's supposed to do that. You're supposed to basically eat a lot of animal foods. And those animal foods basically push up anabolic pathways, but not a lot. Remember, the insulin to glucagon regulates that tight how much. As long as glucagon is slightly elevated to basically provide gluconeogenesis, and it's not being closed off because of too much sugar, so there's only, let's say, 20 grams or in the system, that's not enough to inhibit glucagon. So, or to raise insulin too high because the threshold hasn't been achieved. It's too low, the amount of circulating sugar in the system, and what happens is insulin just won't rise much. Actually, it'll rise more in regards to things like certain amino acids like leucine than a very small amount of sugar, because that's normal, indicated because you have the influx and outflux. When you basically the body sometimes always will generate slightly like the dawn effect where it raises blood sugar slightly. Insulin does not go up. Sugar goes up because traditionally, normally, as a human, you'd go out for the hunt. If insulin rose, it would blunt any further gluconeogenesis and also blunt the ability to basically utilize that energy to go out for the hunt. You just feel lethargic.
Yep. And
You have to
that's
get up.
why
Yeah, go ahead.
sugary pre-workouts are nonsensical. No, it actually gives you less energy.
Exactly. But the body will, unless it hits a certain threshold, this is where the glucagon insulin sort of axis is important that a lot of people miss, because that basically is a regulator in order, because it knows that you still need glucose for certain functions, but you don't want to cut it off when nothing's coming much from the diet. So you have to get over a certain threshold of intake, and that can vary between people depending on genetics. Some people can tolerate, and still stay ketosis up to 25 grams, others up to 50, and others can still have a very low grade, being a low carbohydrate state where they slip in and out up to 80. Above that, most people will basically be kicked out completely out of ketosis for a couple of days if they get over that sort of level, if they keep on eating that sort of stuff every day at those levels. And we've seen it with basically Salad Boy recently in his blood works. It's already showing that it's contraindicated, all his bullshit. And I knew that would happen because basically these people were only having a seasonal, honey and stuff like that, not every day. It's just nonsense. Even Mary Ruddock saw that with the Hadza. They were just seasonally, they didn't bother in the other periods. It's just absolute nonsense. Just basically he just wants to sell a product. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But the reality is when it comes to carbohydrates, not 1 gram is required. Your body can create its own in terms of glucose. But small amounts, will they be have a negative effect? Nah, not really. The small amounts, you can still tolerate a certain amount in that regard. But just the dogma is very, and also with insulin, when insulin rises, IGF rises by the same amount. This is the other nonsense. Oh, you're going to eat a lot of meat and your IGF-1's going to go through the roof. No. Insulin will only jump out of that bandwidth when you add sugar. Only when you add sugar. That's when you can magnify that up to 70 insulin to glucagon. And then IGF-1 goes together. Because IGF-1 and insulin, once upon a time, were like this. They were in cahoots. In first eukaryotic cells, original life, we're talking about millions of years ago, insulin and IGF-1 were one thing. They weren't separate. It was called insulin IGF-1. They were the same thing. It's just hormonally and signaling they've actually separated. But when one goes up, the other one goes up in lockstep. And that's why you see it in all the studies. You see insulin going up, IGF-1 going up. Insulin coming down, IGF-1 coming down. They move together. And so when you've got an insulin to glucagon of 1.3 on a carnivore diet, because insulin is being tapered back by glucagon, what do you think IGF-1's doing? It's down at that level as well. Just enough for muscle protein synthesis. It's not popping above that at all. That's the difference. Add sugar, then you've changed the whole situation. Glucagon is in the toilet. No more gluconeogenesis. You're getting it from the food, and then it magnifies insulin because it has to deal with the excess amount. You can only have so much in the blood. Immediately, IGF-1 pops up as well. You magnify the effect. And the same thing happens with mTOR. mTOR, independently, mTOR can actually rise slightly, but it actually interacts with the other anabolic hormones and goes up together. So you don't get a massive amount. I've always said to these crackpots, show me one study, just one study where insulin and IGF-1 are in a lower level and mTOR is really high. Not one exists. Never one will exist. Ever, because that is illogical physiologically. So mTOR is going to be much lower in an insulin to glucagon of 1.3 on a carnivore diet. It's not going to be over magnified. Remember, leucine only needs a signal with these growth factors because these hormones also have a signaling role. Just uses them as signals to the body. We need to grow muscular tissue. But you can actually put in a faster state. You can, if you put sugar with an animal food, you'll boost that really high. But if you've put no sugar whatsoever and you just put leucine in as a supplement in a faster state, my dirty fast as I call it, you'll get muscle protein synthesis. But insulin will just slightly elevate and then go down. So will IGF-1 and so will mTOR. You won't have much mTOR activation. It'll be slightly higher than your regular sort of fasted state, but it will actually be lower than in a fed state. But you're still getting muscle protein synthesis. when you start using the logic and understanding these signaling sort of pathways, you realize it's only in a deranged state when you're forcing a lot of growth factors too rapidly with glucose in there with the meat. Even Ray Peat knows that. That's why he says you've got to have lean cuts of meat so you don't engage the Randall cycle. He doesn't tell you the Randall cycle because he wants to promote sugar because he's probably in the pocket of the sugar industry. But he basically needs to bullshit to you that it's actually, you need the energy source. But he knows you need the nutrients as well from the animal foods because a vegan diet is just piss poor. These guys are not idiots, but they've manipulated the information in such a way where they're giving you enough energy on the one hand, an energy source, and on the other hand, a lean cut of meat to avoid. You still can get some gradient, a very low gradient of over time of Randall cycle activation. And that will only happen as you get much older. And by then you'll just think, oh, it's just old age. It's through the deuterium levels that are higher in the sugar that have basically caused more mitochondrial damage over the decades that you're doing that. That will slow down the efficiency of the mitochondria. And what will happen is the gradient of engaging the Randall cycle will lower as well. But you'll just think it's just old age at that stage. Incredible. That's why people just don't get it. Because if you don't understand the physiology and the biochemistry, you end up basically listening to these really nice sort of things and all that. I actually found one of my videos where I actually have a go at Ray Peat, the one that I call him a crackpot and stuff like that and all that. Actually, on the Ray Peat blog site, I actually found it. And these guys and all that, guess what one of the guys said? At least he's wearing his circadian rhythm glasses.
I've seen that. I actually found that post.
Okay.
I was investigating their forum and then I found your post and the guys were like, no, they were raging at your video.
Oh, yeah. And some of the stuff I was saying just made no physiological, it was just crap. They weren't even arguing against what I'd actually said. They were just making other statements.
Yes.
And not even criticizing exactly and saying, where am I wrong? Clearly saying, here in that science, he's wrong for this reason. No, they were just blabbering their normal one-liners that they get from Ray Peat. That's all they were doing. And I'm going, you guys are just parrots. You're a bunch of parrots.
He was like,
a bunch of parrots on sugar.
But PUFA is like much more glycating than fructose or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How? That's only if you're engaging the Randall cycle, my dear. Only you're engaging the Randall cycle. That's by mixing macros. If you actually bacon and sugar, you're going to engage the Randall cycle. And then, yes, because bacon has a lot of fat in it, you can't remove it, you can't have it. But if you're having bacon and sugar, you're going to engage the Randall cycle. And yes, it's going to be more glycating because, as I said, somebody asked today, where a lot of research it traditionally used to say in the past that fructose is 7 times more glycating than glucose. And then recently, Lustig and some others have actually said, I can be up to 10 times more glycating. Yes, but that's because of the Randall cycle gradient. It depends how much you're engaging it and what your clearance rate is. As a consequence, it stays in circulation for longer. As a consequence, it can be more glycating. But if you can clear it out of your system because your Randall cycle gradients is much lower, you're clearing it out of the system, it's going to be less glycating, isn't it? That's the difference. It's the Randall cycle gradient that determines the glycation rate or level, whatever you want to call it. That's what they don't understand. And I worked that out in my own head, but the other one's still we've got this study that shows this and all that. And I go, what is the sugar content to fat content in that diet to determine the Randall cycle activation gradient? And then once you look at that, then you'll realize, Oh, those studies here had, because if you look at the composition of the diet, you see how much they had in the, in terms of fat and sugar, like dextrose and stuff like that in the rats, and then the other ones where they had more, and you go, okay, it's a gradient, random cycle gradient, and that's why the glycating factor is higher, because they've put more fructose in there. It's the same amount of fat, more or less, of the standard chow, but they've added more fructose, so obviously they've increased the gradient. They've changed, the. And I'm going, oh, okay. So they're engaging the random cycle at a higher gradient. Well, that is the difference of the glycating factor level. Or they put more fat in, with the same amount of fructose, but again, the same reason.
This is actually interesting, Harry, because Paul Saladino, our favorite doctor, he has been talking a lot about experiments with.
Mr. Reductionist, you mean? That can't logically use his brain and have thought experiments by combining and looking at studies and working out why one happens. The gradient, because he's what I call a reductionist crackpot, like his dear friend Ray Pete as well.
Exactly. No, and like a huge amount of people have totally bought that idea that you need carbs to retain sodium somehow. It's like he started having cramps. Look, I'm with Bart on this one. I really think that he was maybe over exercising, under eating protein, or maybe having meals that were too small somehow.
He was having small amounts of protein.
Yeah.
When you have small amounts of protein, you get less taurine. Even when you cook it, you get less taurine. Less taurine, less of an osmolyte, less ability to regulate your electrolytes. You're going to get into trouble. Now, you put in sugar, it increases your insulin. What it does is it causes more retention of electrolytes, the insulin. Voila, you've solved the problem. You've actually masked the problem and created a new problem called random cycle activation. So you fixed one issue and all that. This is the problem with standard keto diets. Not enough meat, not enough capacity to get enough taurine to regulate your intracellular fluids and the electrolytes of those fluids. That's the problem. This is evolutionary, indicated in research going back millions of years. Complex organisms. I should do that video. I've got a study which goes through talks about, it goes into a lot of detail. It's a book thing. It's not really a study. It's a book thing. And what the book does is it looks at explaining. It looks at explaining basically the purposes of taurine in different tissue types and all that, and how it's actually worked, and evolutionarily how it's come about, its evolutionary role, which is really important. A lot of people don't understand this. It's really, what do you think I say that taurine is like the Swiss Army knife of the body? It's not accidental that I say this, because I know that it's so ancient and so important. And most people, because of processed foods and a lot of other things, are not getting enough these days and having a lot of derangements in their physiology due to that. And a lot of people in the low carb community don't eat enough meat. And so, again, fearing mTOR, which, as I explained earlier, it's a non-issue. But because they fear it, they don't get it, and then they have electrolyte issues, and they blame the lack of sugar, and they do a full circle from one reductionist nonsense to another, and eventually they go all way back to carbs when they left carbs in the first place.
Yep.
Just because they didn't get enough protein. You look at the tribal people, what do? They're all constantly, remember the Inuits sitting there and eating raw meat and cutting large pieces and giving to their kids and eating massive amounts? That's what people do in tribal societies. They don't use insulin to hold on, to cause water retention, to hold on to electrolytes. Remember the video? I did a first video that I did ages ago with Pim Johnson. If you go to my playlist, there's the first video there that talks about the guidelines. I talk about the actual study that Walter Kempner did. Walter Kempner, because he knew that if you put in electrolytes with high carbohydrate and high insulin, what happens is you will get a situation where you have a lot of retention of minerals. You can't get rid of, excrete them. So he used to recommend on this high sugar diet, and he used to whip them to make sure they got enough calories, even raw sugar. And he basically, this is back in the 1930s when they didn't understand the Randall cycle. Philip Randall hadn't published until 1963. And so obviously he could see a benefit. He didn't know, he'd come out of Germany, he didn't know anything about the keto diet that was being run out of the 1920s from Johns Hopkins University Hospital. So he tried another method and realized quite clearly if you don't take out the electrolytes, because of the retention, the water retention, you will end up magnifying the fluid buildup inside the cells, and you can actually burst the cells. You can actually do damage to the cells. So what he did was he removed all electrolytes completely from the diet, no electrolytes, because he knew that the insulin would retain the fluid retention, and that would retain all those without requiring to consume any. This is why the fruitarians that eat a lot of sugar, the ones that eat excessive and don't waste away very fast initially, have no requirement. They don't take any electrolytes. Have you noticed? None whatsoever. Because they're running a much higher insulin, which actually is keeping their electrolytes, the ones that they've already had in their system. They do fall over time to a lower level, but they can still sort of function at a sort of a lower level. On a keto diet, you don't have the insulin. If you don't have enough taurine to regulate the kidneys to hold on to electrolytes, you'll dump far more. That's the problem. That is why a keto diet is not indicated long term in its traditional way it's put together with a high fat form. When there's sufficient, 30% protein as your general macros, 30% or more, you're still in ketosis, in a low grade of ketosis, but you don't have any electrolyte issues. Again, due to the osmotic effect of the taurine coming in from the animal food. That's what Salad Boy was doing wrong. And certain people have higher requirements than others due to genetics to achieve that osmotic effect. So there are variations on the requirements of taurine between people as well, because there is different rates at which you synthesize it from methionine, cysteine, taurine. Some people are better converters, synthesize more in their body, some less. So they need to get it from the diet, and that would depend on genetics. So you can have two carnivores doing the same macros, and the one having electrolyte issues and the other not. Again, because of the internal endogenous biosynthesis is going to be different. There's a lot of factors at play always. There is, that's why I always say to people, what did your ancestors eat? Maybe it's a good idea that you did the same thing and you'd have less problems. So, and like the the Irish and their requirements for retinol and not carotenoids. Otherwise, they go very orangey in the skin. Yes, they glow like an orange, an unpeeled orange. Colourful, but not indicated. Mick the Vagoon, not indicated because he's Irish background. Idiot.
Complete idiot, that guy. It was one of his videos, like he was eating, I don't know, it was a huge amount of rice, and I was like, that's a slave diet. What is this guy? Oh my god.
Look, when he does his own videos and his own thing, he actually does a lot of cuts in between and stuff like that. And also he uses filters and all that. I remember one interview that he did with John Venus, and he looked like absolutely rat shit, let alone he was basically shaking and really anxious and all that. He really looked, I mean, John literally had to coax him along. It was ridiculous. And you could actually see how bad he was, his skin and everything. But on his own site, he basically just masks everything. He's so ideologically driven about the animals that he knows down deep that his diet is not perfect, but he has to sell it because he doesn't want to lose any of the vegans basically to the carnivores or to others that will basically go back to animal slaughter, So he's ideologically driven, not health driven. All that is bullshit, the other stuff. That's just basically to his narrative. As I said, that's why he doesn't do a lot of interviews. He avoids them because it doesn't show the best side of him, where he can manage that on his own sort of environment, where he's got a proper studio and he can mask all these little things that he can hide the
heavily manufactured, just like like the diet he's proposed.
Yes. I'll put a link, Neff. I'll put a link up in the comments area, in the description later, because I have to put a couple of things there as well for that, the protocol as well, that doctor's protocol. Now, I don't know whether people will be able to use that. Don't know. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a hard one. Yeah, exactly. Meat never tastes bad. Exactly. Tastes great. Yep. G'day, Lisa. Continuing. I must have missed your previous one. Sorry about that. Where, the stream has been, yes. This constipation problem was way before changed to keto 5 years ago. My dad had some problems, multiple system atrophy like Parkinson's. I'm thinking gallbladder sludge or brain, not sending message. Yeah, a lot of gallbladder sludge. I've had gallbladder sludge for a very long period of time. My father, luckily, well, he'd probably disagree on that because he had a big stone. It came through, caused him pancreatitis, but perfect. No other issue. Absolutely perfect. So in hindsight, I wish I'd gone through one day of excruciating pain. I have done that with kidney stones, and it would have been all over, but it took me months and months of high taurine levels to clear out the friggin' sludge out of my gallbladder. It's taken me a long time, and occasionally I still get a bit. There may be still some in there. I haven't had an incident now for a while. I'm hoping I'm all over it. Like I haven't had an incident with oxalate dumping either, so I'm hoping I'm all over it now. Cross your fingers, I usually say to myself. We didn't start species appropriately, none of us, and this is the problem. So we are all damaged to some degree, and we're trying to fix ourselves as we go along, and it takes time, and you have to be patient. And it's good that you understand that. It does take time. Now, with Parkinson's and stuff like that, taurine does magic stuff for Parkinson's, MS, and stuff like that as well, and so does choline. Some people can have a choline problem in synthesizing it endogenously, very poor, or converters, and so may need to support that secondary methylation pathway with choline supplementation or eating more eggs. One of the two. Also helps with exporting fat, and sometimes not having good ability to export fat out of the liver can cause some derangements that can have this, what is called hepatic atrophy, hepatic encephalopathy, which is which is due to the liver causing certain brain inflammation. So, and the two things that are important there are choline and taurine. Both are important for that condition. And that condition is also associated with people with Parkinson's, with MS, and many other Alzheimer's and dementia, and many of those other conditions as well. So you may be one of those lucky few people like myself that have certain genetics that have problems with, conversions and stuff like that in our bodies. And that means we need to get it from the diet or supplement. There's no ifs or buts or whatever options. There are no options outside that. You got to get it. So that can be a bloody issue for some people. And I've had fatty liver, all sorts of issues, and eventually resolved them by, eggs, getting back to eggs, which I feared because the crackpots had told me there was so much cholesterol in them. But I believe that crap, like a lot of us,
My only curse about being a hyper responder is that I have to put up with my mom thinking I'm going to die. That's it.
Yeah. I'm lucky I'm not a hyper responder, so that's it. It's easy with me because whenever I do my blood works, it's all in the sort of what they call normal range. Even though I'm eating shitloads of eggs, meats, and whatever else, I'm just not one of those hyper responders. So due to genetics again, that's high clearance, but it's unfortunate that some people are completely healthy and they just have that one single biomarker because of the ApoE gene and a few other genetics that they have more circulating LDL. Because it can be for two reasons: the ApoE side of things, and also, in some regards, certain people have certain genetics which have longer lasting LDL circulation. But it's actually a good thing. It's actually a longevity thing. Because it actually means that you've got you've got the provision of cholesterol around to heal and repair tissue. So you can actually tolerate more damage, and also you can also tolerate more, especially if you've got those sort of genes. You've got better genes to tolerate better, responses to pathogens in the environment. The ApoE44 is the best genetics you can have to fight off pathogens. It's the ancestral one. In a very highly pathogenic environment, you're not living in cities, sterilized cities, but in a very pathogenic environment in nature, it's the best to have in terms of that. But in terms of your medical doctor, it's the worst to have because he's going to continually harass you about your LDL. I know, it's ridiculous.
The folks at the laboratory, they were like, we need you to get here a second time because your numbers are weird. We need another sample. I'm like, what the hell? and they were asking for my triglycerides again because it was really low. And they were like, no, it doesn't make any sense.
Yes, because you're a crackpot and you don't understand physiology. That's why it doesn't make any sense. Is because I'm powering my body with fat. So the triglycerides, this is why your LDL goes up, because you're taking in, remember, I've got more circulating chylomicrons because they're not being taken up. So mine chylomicrons and remnants are going to circulate for longer and provide that energy to the body. You're, on the other hand, you actually go 10 minutes and then they go straight to the liver, get re-exported as VLDL, and then the VLDL goes to IDL and LDL, but the VLDL and until it gets to IDL and all that, that's actually going around. There's no sugar, very little. So what are these triglycerides doing? The VLDL are shrinking because they're giving up all those triglycerides to the cells as energy. What's left? Every time you export a VLDL, there's a bit of cholesterol that's placed in it and triglycerides. But if you're actually boating these and taking them up very quickly, the triglycerides, when they test, they're going to find low triglycerides, but the leftover, high cholesterol that's left over. That's all it is. But for me, when they take a look, they're going to go, oh, there's not as much because there's still a lot of remnant and chylomicrons circulating the system. And some people, like with 2,2, they can have up to a couple of hours of circulating chylomicrons. So if your chylomicrons are circulating for longer than somebody else, they're not going to be converted to VLDL, and less is going to go back to the liver, so less is going to be exported out as VLDL. So less is going to end up as LDL. But it's all the same amount of energy. It's just in different boats. And they're measuring only one group of boats, but they're ignoring the other group of boats. Again, great reductionist, lab work. It's ridiculous. What should they be looking at? Is your LDL oxidized or native? That's what they should be looking at if they really care about your health.
Precisely.
It's, yeah. Yes, what can one say? What can one say? Yes.
Oh, I think I froze up somehow.
Oh, you did. Don't worry. You're in a good styled position as you froze up, so Shelley's probably happy and a few others. You're there smiling and all that.
Oh my.
You might have to turn your video off and turn it back on and see whether that works.
Possibly, yes.
Yes, that's my favorite one. Clean and see, as I said, some vegetarians too produce good products. I'll give them that. They're less in it for the money, they're more in it for the quality. And it's a better price. Yep. Yeah, it does. My back jaw tooth felt like I had an abscess developing. Yeah, glands swelling badly. Yep. Some people in the back. I know my brother's partner. She basically got a lot of pain in the back as well. It can actually affect you in the back and different joints and stuff like that. Different people. So there's a lot of variations. I remember the video that I did actually covered a lot of the variations, but the big ones are basically this sort of malaise of really feeling weak and, issues with sleep as well. That's another place where taurine is going to help with improving people's sleep if they're suffering from those sort of conditions. So, yep, you're much better now. Good to go. Yeah, so, yeah, it's... The reality is, it's the reason why I went up to 6 grams of taurine, and while I'm at 10,000 IUs and when I got a sniffle, I went up to 20, so I can stay in the negative range. That's why, and not get any symptoms or any side effects whatsoever. In that regard, high clearance. So I'm glad that I did actually that. I'd done a couple of weeks earlier a big sort of fast as well, which was good, and cleared out my old immune system and rebuilt it. So that really set me up perfectly when I did get exposed. And Sean had, he'd done something similar. So when basically his exposure happened, he's just basically T lymphocytes just were there like little Daleks, exterminate, just wiping out all those viral particles that were coming in. So what the body's done for a lot of times. That's why we don't see in the tribal areas. When we'll talk. Remember when I asked, Mary at the time when she was with a Maasai, I said, "Have you seen anything?" She said, "No, nothing in the tribal areas." I mean, they'd noticed some in the cities where people are on kibble and stuff like that, but when they're in the tribal areas, nothing. Amongst the Hudsers, nothing amongst the Maasai, nothing. It was just like zero. There's nothing here to see.
And one of the things that surprised me the most was when she reported that it's very common for people to have some like a type of fidgeting reflex. Even I do that sometimes, but she said that they don't do that at all. I'm like, well, that is very peculiar. I mean,
Yeah.
they must be so calm somehow, you know,
Exactly.
really stable that they don't do this type of thing,
I wonder what they're eating.
right?
Yeah, but they've been doing that all their life. There's a difference between doing it all your life and not doing it. And the other thing that I found really important was the kids that came back from the school that had lower vitamin D levels and also had lower taurine levels because they were eating inappropriate foods. They were struggling to deal with pathogens in the environment. It's exactly what we've been saying. It's not terrain theory, guys, and it's not basically, the the sort of killer virus sort of ideology that everything's out there trying to kill you. No, it's a properly regulated immune system with animal foods and the sun, vitamin D that is, that basically provide your ability. It gives your body robustness to be able to deal with pathogens. If they can exploit your receptors, they can be pathogenic. If they can't exploit your receptors, they're neutral. They can be pathogenic to bacteria, which they can infect. They can even infect each other, or they can really, So, at the end of the day, if your immune system is good, you will properly regulate all these little microorganisms in your system. And it's not a terrain theory; it's just basically proper food environment that works synergistically to provide a robust immune system that actually keeps things under control and in proper regulation. When we don't eat appropriately, it doesn't mean that tribal people are not going to basically fall victims to a very severe pathogen that will kill them, like Ebola. So terrain theory isn't helping there, is it? So let's be realistic about this. So this whole notion of terrain theory is just nonsense. The whole notion that everything's trying to kill you is also a bunch of crock. It's really that we live in a complex environment. Evolutionary, a lot of organisms are competing within our environment and also within us as well. And as a consequence, if we have a robust immune system, we can tolerate a lot of this sort of stuff. If we don't, then we get into trouble. Simple as that. It's not complicated. Good regulated immune system. Even, Shelley, she's not doing too well, minor stuff, but she's got a much better status than the average American. Probably not to the level of Ancestral. None of us do, because we're quite damaged by the time we get to the carnivore diet. But, we are far more robust than the general community. Most of the general community is sick in frames, in walking frames and all sorts of things. How many young people I see nowadays with walking sticks? It's ridiculous. So it's just sick population. Obese and sick. It's just absolutely. Now, I'm going to pull the plug because I have to be somewhere else. And did we actually get all the... Did we actually get all the actual stuff that you put up, Lukey? The attachments?
Yep. Yeah, that
okay,
was the only one.
That was the only one, the video. Oh, yeah. Yep, that was fun. I'll have to watch that and actually do this with myself. So, look, I have fun. I take the mickey out of myself all the time. I sometimes look at these things and I'm just in absolute tears. Some of the stuff that you've done with me in ridiculous sort of poses or whatever like that, and I absolutely bloody love it. So I really enjoy it. I mean, people take themselves far too serious in this world.
Exactly.
Far too serious. So I sometimes, there's some people I sometimes are way too serious. And I throw a remark and I've upset that person. I've upset that person.
It was like when that guy did an imitation of Bart, like Fart K, and they thought that Bart was going to be really offended, but he just lost his shit laughing at that.
Exactly.
It was really fun. Oh, God.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, yeah, I sort of have to basically laugh with that sort of stuff constantly. Um, yeah, it's really funny. Um, yeah. Ah, yes, yes. The muscular fat modern bodybuilder. Yes.
You know, the other day a guy was telling me how hard it is, like how much uh, control he has to exert, how much he has to regulate his diet just to keep visible abs. And I'm like, that's not really supposed to be that hard, especially for a male, but whatever.
I'm just going to say one thing about this, Bruce. The Han Chinese have high conversion rates of choline and taurine and many other things endogenously in their body. For instance, Westerners, probably about 1 or 2% can do the conversion for choline successfully. Sorry, not choline. 3 to 4%. Most people need to get some out of their diet because they've got very low levels of conversion, stuff like that. So you need to get it from the diet, but most be able to get to some of the others. The Han Chinese can actually synthesize 76% of the Han Chinese can synthesize endogenous choline. They don't have to eat any choline, zero. That's because one of their emperors was basically a vagoon and penalized people of eating animal foods for a very long period of time. And those who survived acquired these genetic mutations. And that's why they have high tolerance to a number of deprivations. They can do very high carbohydrate diets in comparison to other populations. They still can engage the Randall cycle and all that if they do mixed macros, all that. The only difference is they can tolerate certain deficiencies much better than many others. And let's not forget, these Chinese were not only eating, they were also eating some other plants and stuff like that, because the Chinese have been eating green plants and all sorts of other things. Not just rice. They don't just eat rice, but they would have collected other things and cooked it together with the rice and got some other nutrients here or there. And they'll eat anything like the French. They'll eat insects and all sorts of things. So they would have been eating other things, not just the rice. The rice would have been a filler together with other whatever else they could grab within their environment, present environment. So, so there is, that as well. That's just what the Chinese, the Japanese provided them, would have been that minimal sort of stuff. The rest, whatever you can get and survive, and some would survive better than others. But yeah, there's all that sort of stuff. You got to nuance it when you look back, and people can still starve and survive for a certain length of time. If you, as long as you're getting sugar in, you're in a fasting mimicking diet, in a sense, like people who are on fruitarian diets. You can still last for a few years on it. That's the reality. But you're going to be emaciated by the end. Some will last more than others, and others will die from starvation more than others. Again, due to insufficient amounts. Well, they were too thin by the time, and they just wasted away. They weren't able to get enough protein and other things. You can turn over protein in your body. You can turn over certain things, so you can still survive for a certain length of time, depending on your fat stores. So the fatter you are, you'll last longer. So the richer you were, you would have lasted longer in war deprivation compared to somebody who's thin already. So yes, that's why more peasants died in those times than wealthier people. Again, same reasons, So yes, I've got to get out of here because I've got to be somewhere else. So thanks, everyone. Yes, I would have loved to answer more of people's questions and stuff like that. There's always, in about 4 hours' time, bit over 4 hours, there's the Eurasia live stream. So if anybody wants to turn up to that, you're more than welcome. And I'll leave the last note, bye from me, see yous, and the last note to Loki.
Oh yeah, so I just want everyone to keep up with the good they're doing, The usual thing I like to say, consistency paves the way to greatness. And that's it. Stay well, everyone.
That's basically it. Thanks, guys. See yous.